I was forced into a union meant to secure an heir before the patriarch dies, but the man chosen to put that heir in me is not gentle, not kind, and not safe. And once the vows are spoken, he stops acting like I belong to the dynasty and starts acting like I belong to him. This is our story. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Francesca. No one asked me to sit down. That was the first sign. Not the locked doors, not the men posted outside the war room like statues with veins, not even the fact that my grandfather's favorite doctor was already in the house at 8 a.m, his leather bag clutched like a verdict. It was the way my uncle kept standing behind my chair, hands on the backrest, possessive, as if he was ready to push me into place if I refused, as if my body had already been assigned to the day's agenda. Francesca. My aunt's voice was soft in that false, polite way that women use when they're about to cut you and expect you to thank them for doing it cleanly. We need you to listen. I looked at her. I didn't look away. I am listening. She flinched like my calm offended her. Good. The Bernardello war room smelled like espresso and expensive wood and old victories that had stopped meaning anything. The walls were lined with framed photographs, my grandfather with politicians, my grandfather with mayors, my grandfather with men who now pretended they'd never needed him, all of them smiling, all of them lying. At the head of the long table he sat in his chair, shoulders smaller than they used to be. His skin had gone papery. His hands looked like they belonged to someone older than the man I'd grown up fearing. But his eyes were exactly the same. They tracked the room like they owned it. Like they still owned us. A nasal cannula sat under his nose, clear tubing looping behind his ears. He hated it. You could see it in the tension around his mouth, in the way his jaw clenched as if he could crush oxygen into obedience. I kept my face blank. I kept my spine straight. I kept my hands relaxed at my sides so no one could see the tremor threatening under my skin. Sit, my uncle said, voice low, impatient. I didn't. My grandfather stared at me for a long moment, then spoke in that slow, deliberate tone that used to make grown men sweat through their use of suits. Francesca, he said, as if my name was a title and not a person. You've been careless. A hot flare snapped behind my ribs. Careless. You've been living, my aunt corrected quickly, as if she could soften his accusation into something palatable. You've been distracted. By what? I asked. My own life. My uncle's fingers tightened on the chair behind me. This isn't the time. It never was. I looked at my grandfather again. What is this? He didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch. He always did. It was his favorite method of control. Make you fill the empty space with your own fear. I didn't. I waited him out. Finally, he nodded toward the doctor, standing near the door. Tell her, my grandfather said. The doctor swallowed. Signor Bernardello's condition has progressed, he began, voice careful. I already knew my grandfather was sick. Everyone knew. The empire didn't shake because of rumors. It shook because the men who fed off his power could smell that the old lion was slowing down. But the way the doctor said progressed made my stomach tighten. How long? My uncle demanded. The doctor hesitated. My grandfather's eyes sharpened. Speak. The doctor exhaled. Weeks, he said. Maybe less. The room went still. Even the air felt like it stopped moving. My aunt pressed her hand to her throat. My uncle swore softly under his breath. Two men in suits at the far end exchanged a glance that was too quick to be innocent. I didn't react. I refused. Because reacting would make it real in a way I didn't have the luxury to handle right now. My grandfather watched me with the same cold interest he used on markets. Now, he said, you understand the urgency. I forced my voice steady. Urgency for what? My uncle stepped around the chair and finally moved into my line of sight, his expression tight, impatient, almost angry, as if my ignorance was an inconvenience. For succession, he said. I stared at him. There are 3 sons in this family. My uncle's mouth tightened. And there are 10 factions ready to split this empire the moment your grandfather dies. My aunt's voice was softer. We need certainty, Francesca. That word, certainty, made my skin prickle. The doctor looked down at his hands as if he didn't want to be part of this. The men at the end of the table sat straighter. I understood then. Not the whole picture, not the details, but the shape of it. This meeting wasn't about my grandfather's health. It was about who got to wear the crown when he was gone, and the fact that they'd summoned me meant I wasn't here as family. I was here as a tool. My grandfather leaned forward slightly, the movement laboring but controlled. The empire is not a story, he said. It's a machine. It runs on continuity. I felt cold spread under my skin. And you think I'm continuity? He didn't blink. You are. My aunt reached for my hand like she was comforting me. I pulled away before she could touch me. Her lips parted. Francesca. Don't, I said quietly. My uncle slapped a folder onto the table. The sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Here, he said. I stared at the folder. Thick, stamped, sealed. My name typed neatly on the front as if it belonged there. Open it, my grandfather said. I didn't move. I met his eyes. What is it? My grandfather's voice didn't change. Your marriage contract. My breath left my body in a silent rush. For a second I was 8 years old again, standing in a hallway outside this same room, hearing my grandfather tell someone on the phone that love was a luxury and luxuries were for people who didn't understand survival. I forced air back into my lungs. No, I said. My uncle's face went hard. It's done. My aunt's voice tried to soften it again. It's not what you think. It's not. What? I cut in. Romantic? My aunt's eyes flashed with irritation. It's necessary. I stared at them all, the doctor, the advisors, the men who'd known about this before I walked in, and felt something sharp break inside me. Not grief, not shock. Betrayal. This wasn't a proposal. This was a decision already made. They were just delivering it to the person being sacrificed. I'm not marrying anyone, I said. My grandfather's expression didn't change. Yes, you are. My throat tightened. You can't force. I can, he said simply. I felt my pulse hammer in my throat. This is insane. No, he replied. This is the only way we survive. My uncle pushed the folder closer across the table with 2 fingers like it disgusted him to touch it. Open it, he said again. I didn't touch it. Who? My grandfather's gaze was fixed on me like I was a problem to be solved. A man who will secure the alliance we need. A man who will stabilize the succession before I die. My stomach turned. His name, I said. My aunt hesitated as if the name itself was a weapon. My grandfather didn't. Lazzaro Toscano. The name hit the room like thunder. Even the men at the end of the table shifted. The doctor's eyes flicked up, then away. My uncle swallowed. I knew that name. Everyone did. The Toscano heir was a story people told in lower voices. Cold, strategic, violent when necessary. And the worst part was that necessary seemed to mean whatever he decided it meant. He was not a man you married for romance. He was a man you married when you were desperate and had run out of cleaner options. No, I said again, but the word felt smaller this time. My grandfather's mouth tightened faintly, almost satisfaction. You will. I looked at my aunt. You agreed to this. Her eyes softened for a moment, sympathy, maybe even regret. Then it vanished behind discipline. We don't have a choice, she said quietly. I laughed once, sharp. You always have a choice. You just didn't choose me. My uncle's face flushed. Watch your tone. I turned on him, voice cold. My tone? You're selling me to a man known for blood and you want me to be polite? My grandfather's eyes narrowed. You're not being sold. I stepped closer to the table, refusing to sit, refusing to make myself smaller. What do you call it then? He didn't blink. Duty. The word felt like a blade sliding under my ribs. My aunt whispered, Francesca. I ignored her. I looked at my grandfather. And what do you want from this marriage? He said it without hesitation. An heir. The room went silent again. My stomach turned into a cold knot. My uncle spoke like he was delivering a business forecast. Fast, he added. I felt something almost animal rise in my chest. Not fear. Rage. You're talking about my body like I'm not here, I said, voice trembling with control. Do you hear yourselves? My grandfather's eyes were flat. Your body is part of this family's future. No, I snapped. My body is mine. My uncle scoffed. Not when the dynasty is collapsing. I stared at him as if he'd slapped me. My aunt's voice turned hard. If you think this is cruel, Francesca, you don't understand what cruelty looks like when our enemies move in. My grandfather leaned back slowly, the movement costing him. He inhaled through the cannula like he despised needing air. You will marry Toscano, he said, and you will become pregnant. I felt my skin go cold. You don't get to. I do, he cut in, because I built this, and I will not watch it die because my granddaughter wants to pretend she's separate from it. I stared at him, breath unsteady. I wanted to scream, but screaming would be satisfaction for them, so I did what I'd learned to do in this house. I went quiet. Quiet was stronger than tears. Quiet was a knife you could hide. I looked down at the folder again, the seal, the paperwork, my name, already printed, already decided. My voice came out low. When? My uncle's relief was immediate. My grandfather's mouth tightened. Tomorrow. The word rang in my skull, tomorrow. No time to think. No time to run. No time to find a door that wasn't already watched. I swallowed hard and forced myself to ask the only question that mattered. Does he know? I said. Does Toscano know what you're doing? My grandfather's eyes sharpened. He knows what he agreed to. A chill moved down my spine. You've spoken to him already, I whispered. My aunt's voice was barely audible. Yes. Betrayal landed again, fresh, deeper. I looked at the men at the far end of the table. And you all knew. No one denied it. I felt something inside me crystallize. A cold understanding. There was no rescue coming. Not from family, not from the law, not from morality, only from leverage, only from power. And right now I had none. The door opened behind the doctor with a quiet click. Every head turned. My grandfather didn't move, but his eyes sharpened like he'd been waiting for this moment. A man stepped inside. Tall, dark suit, no unnecessary jewelry, hair cut neat, expression unreadable. He moved like the room belonged to him, even though he was the guest. I knew him instantly without needing an introduction, because men like that don't look like strangers. They look like consequences. Lazzaro Toscano's gaze swept the room once, quickly, efficiently. Then it landed on me. Not my face first, my posture, my hands, the distance between me and the contract. He assessed me like an acquisition. It should have humiliated me. Instead, it made my spine stiffen with defiance. My grandfather spoke, voice heavy. Lazzaro. Lazzaro's eyes didn't leave me. Signor Bernardello. He didn't sound impressed. He didn't sound afraid. He sounded certain. My uncle cleared his throat. We were discussing. I know what you were discussing, Lazzaro said calmly. He stepped closer to the table and finally looked at the folder with my name on it. Then he looked back at me. His gaze was cold, controlled, but there was something under it. Interest, not warmth, something more dangerous. Attention. Francesca Bernardello, he said. Hearing my name in his voice made my skin prickle. He said it like it already belonged to him. I lifted my chin. Lazzaro Toscano. A flicker, barely visible, moved through his eyes. Amusement? Approval? The smallest crack in the ice? He stepped closer, stopping at my side of the table. Too close. Close enough that his presence changed the air. He didn't touch me. Not yet. But his proximity felt like a hand at my throat. You understand what this is, he said. I stared at him. I understand what they want. His gaze didn't soften. And what do you want? The question startled me because no one in this room had asked it. Not once. My throat tightened. I forced my voice steady. To not be treated like a womb with a last name. The room went rigid. My aunt inhaled sharply. My uncle's face went red. My grandfather's eyes narrowed with warning. Lazzaro's gaze held mine. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand. 2 fingers came under my chin, tilting my face up. Not rough, not gentle, controlled. The touch was intimate in a way that made my skin go hot with humiliation and something worse, awareness. The room disappeared for a second. Just his hand, his eyes, my breath. He studied me like he was deciding whether I was fragile. I refused to be. I met his gaze without flinching. Lazzaro's voice dropped, Italian threading through it like a private blade. Ascolta me, he murmured. Listen to me. I didn't move. He continued, calm enough to be terrifying. They want an heir. My stomach turned. He didn't apologize. He didn't pretend this wasn't ugly. He simply said, you will give them one. My nails bit into my palm. Then he added, voice colder, eyes still on mine, but you will do it as my wife. His hand fell away from my chin. The air returned. The room rushed back in. My grandfather looked satisfied. My aunt looked sick. My uncle looked relieved. And I stood there with my skin burning where he'd touched me, realizing the contract wasn't ink anymore. It was a man who didn't pretend, a man who didn't soften, a man who had just made it clear my life was no longer mine. And the most terrifying part wasn't that he was ruthless. It was that he sounded like he believed every word he'd said. And as the room began to move again, papers sliding, voices resuming, I understood the true shape of the sentence they'd handed me. I wasn't being married off to produce an heir. I was being placed inside a man's possession. And Lazzaro Toscano had already decided he wasn't sharing.
Chapter 2. Lazzaro, the first thing I did on my wedding day was fire a man. Not publicly. Not theatrically. No shouting in hallways. No blood on marble. Just a quiet phone call that ended a career. Because he used the word broodmare in a text meant for my uncle. He forgot my name was attached to the subject. He forgot the woman they were discussing now wore my ring. So I removed him from my world before breakfast. That was the tone of the day. Silk on the surface. Teeth underneath. Raphael waited in my office when I arrived. Suit pressed. Eyes sharp. Jaw set like he hadn't slept. His phone was in his hand. The screen dark. As if it had burned him. Speak. I said. He didn't waste time. Bernadello's staff are already in the West Wing. They brought their own security. Their own legal counsel. Their own doctor. Of course they did. The Bernardellos didn't hand over an asset without sending handlers. They're treating her like a transfer. Raphael added. They are. I replied. Raphael's gaze held mine. Do you want them removed? Yes. I said. He nodded once. After the ceremony? No. I said. Voice flat. After the vows. Before the door closes. Raphael didn't ask why. He understood. Let the world see the marriage. Then lock the world out. He handed me a folder. Contract copies. Fertility schedule. Medical oversight terms. I didn't open it. I already knew what it contained. Polite words for control. You approved the medical addendum. Raphael said carefully. I approved the timeline. I corrected. His brows lifted slightly. You don't want the oversight. He guessed. I want an heir. I said. Raphael didn't flinch. And the wife. The words sat in the air like smoke. I looked at him. I want my house to remain my house. Raphael nodded. Understood. That was the thing about loyalty. It doesn't ask you to be good. It asks you to be consistent. I walked out of the office and into a corridor that had been transformed overnight. White flowers. Gold fixtures. A chandelier they'd polished until it looked like it could blind God. The smell of perfume and fresh-cut roses mixing with the cold bite of security equipment. People think weddings are romance. In our world, they're announcements. And announcements are dangerous because they draw eyes. I turned a corner and saw the Bernardello entourage. Lawyers in dark suits. 2 women in pearls. A doctor with a leather case. Men with earpieces pretending they were decor. Francesca stood in the center of it all like a statue placed on display. Her dress was ivory, expensive. Tailored. Perfect. It didn't make her look soft. It made her look like a sacrifice wrapped in silk. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't crying. Her chin was lifted. Mouth neutral. Eyes sharp enough to cut through anyone who tried to touch her without permission. Good. Better than good. Because a woman who looks breakable gets treated like breakable. A woman who looks unbreakable makes people hesitate. Francesca's gaze found me across the corridor. No warmth. No hope. No pleading. Just anger so controlled it looked like ice. She looked at me like I was the face of her imprisonment. She wasn't wrong. I walked toward her anyway. The doctor began speaking the second I was close enough to hear. Signor Toscano, the schedule we discussed, not here. I said. The doctor blinked. I'm only, not here. I repeated, voice still calm. He swallowed and shut his mouth. One of the pearl women, older, elegant, cold, stepped closer. Lazaro, we should speak about. You should step back. I replied. Her eyes widened. Offended. Good. Let her be offended. Offense is what people feel when they're used to control and someone refuses them. Francesca's gaze flicked briefly to the woman, then back to me. I watched her read the room like she'd been trained to do since childhood. Every angle, every loyalty, every lie. Then her voice came, low enough that only I could hear. They brought their own doctor. She said, yes. And their own security. She added, yes. Her mouth tightened. So I'm a prisoner being transferred. I looked at her face, perfectly composed. Eyes too bright. You're a wife being acquired. I said. Her nostrils flared. How comforting. I didn't soften it. Softness would insult her. Softness would imply she needed to be handled gently to survive. She didn't. She needed truth and boundaries. I leaned slightly closer. Do not let them touch you. I murmured. Her brows snapped together. They already have. Not anymore. I said. Her eyes held mine for a long beat. Then her voice dropped. You don't get to pretend you're different. I met her gaze. I don't pretend. That seemed to unsettle her more than any vow. Because pretending would have been easier to hate. Truth is harder. A man approached, Bernadello legal counsel. Signor Toscano, We need your signature on the final. I didn't look away from Francesca when I answered. Raphael will handle it. The lawyer hesitated, then turned toward Raphael like he'd just swallowed pride. Francesca watched that exchange. Her voice came sharper. You're drawing lines. Yes. For them. She clarified. For everyone. I corrected. She stared at me like she didn't know what to do with that. Good. Confusion is where cracks form. Cracks are where obsession gets in. I stepped back slightly, giving the corridor space again. Time. Raphael said quietly, appearing at my shoulder. Ceremony begins in 15. Good. I replied. Francesca's hands stayed perfectly still at her sides. But I noticed the small things she tried to hide, the way her fingers flexed once, like she was fighting the instinct to run. I didn't blame her. If I were being marched into a cage, I'd bite too. We moved to the ceremony hall. The Bernardellos had chosen a cathedral with old stone and high ceilings that made every whisper carry. They wanted tradition and legitimacy and God watching, as if God cared about succession. The aisle was lined with white flowers and men who scanned the room like predators. Everyone important was there. Partners, rivals, friends, men who would smile at my face and count the days until they could profit from my mistake. The patriarch sat in the front row, Francesca's grandfather, oxygen line visible now, no longer hidden. A dying king on a throne he refused to leave. His gaze followed Francesca as she entered, not with love, with appraisal, as if he were watching a machine being wheeled into position. She walked down the aisle slowly, controlled. She didn't look at him. Good. If she looked at him, she'd give him something, a flicker of emotion, a crack. She looked straight ahead, at me, as if I was the only enemy worth tracking. I stood at the altar in a black suit and watched her approach. She didn't glow. She didn't soften. She looked like a woman walking into a war she didn't choose. I admired that, then hated myself for admiring anything about this. Because admiration leads to attachment. Attachment leads to vulnerability. And vulnerability gets people killed. The priest began speaking. I didn't listen. I watched the crowd. I watched the exits. I watched my wife's breathing, steady, controlled, too controlled. When the priest asked if I accepted her, my answer came without hesitation. See. When he asked if she accepted me, there was a pause, one beat too long. The room held its breath. Francesca's eyes flicked to mine. Not pleading, not hope. A cold, furious question. Are you worth this? She lifted her chin. Yes. The word sounded like a weapon, not a surrender. Good. Then the rings. I took the band, gold, heavy, and slid it onto her finger. Her hand was steady. Her skin was cold. Not fear cold. Rage cold. When she slipped the ring on mine, her fingers brushed my knuckles for a fraction of a second. The contact was nothing. It felt like everything. Not because it was romantic. Because it was real. She didn't tremble. She didn't hesitate. She branded me back. The priest declared us married. Applause rippled through the cathedral like a lie. Flashbulbs popped. People smiled. The patriarch nodded once. Satisfied, like he'd just secured a shipment. Francesca's jaw clenched. I leaned slightly closer to her, voice low enough to be ours alone. Breathe. I murmured in Italian. Respira. Her eyes snapped to mine, offended by the command. Then she inhaled anyway, slow, controlled, as if she'd chosen it rather than obeyed. Good. We turned to walk down the aisle together. A sea of faces, hands reaching. Congratulations offered like hooks. I kept my palm at Francesca's lower back, guiding, not tender, territorial. A statement to the room. This woman is not communal property anymore. Francesca's posture stayed rigid beneath my hand. But she didn't step away. She didn't flinch. She understood what my touch meant in this crowd. Protection. Yes. Also claim. And claim has consequences. At the reception, the ceremony turned into spectacle. Crystal glasses. String quartet. White tablecloths that looked like innocence. The Bernardellos wanted the world to see beauty. They didn't want the world to see the machinery beneath it. Francesca stood at my side like a blade disguised as jewelry. People approached in waves. Men I knew. Men I didn't. Men I distrusted. Women who smiled at Francesca too brightly. Eyes sharp with assessment. A rival woman passed by, polished, expensive, and looking at Francesca like she was temporary. Francesca met her gaze without blinking. Good. Let them measure her. Let them find steel. Then the patriarch rose. The room shifted instantly, attention snapping to him like obedience on instinct. He lifted a glass, hand trembling slightly, but his voice still carried. This union, he said, is not about romance. It is about survival. Some people laughed politely like it was charming. I didn't. Francesca didn't. The patriarch's gaze fixed on his granddaughter, and the cruelty in it was ceremonial. My family has endured because we understand duty, he continued. And now, with this marriage, we secure the future. He paused deliberately. Then he said the thing every person in the room expected and pretended not to hunger for. An heir, he declared. The word rippled through the room like heat. Francesca's shoulders stiffened. I felt it under my hand, her body reacting to being reduced. The patriarch smiled faintly, satisfied. Soon, he added. I watched Francesca's face. Her mouth didn't move. Her eyes didn't widen. But there was a small flicker, pain, humiliation, fury, so fast most people would miss it. I didn't miss it. My hand tightened slightly at her back. Not comfort, a warning, to the room. Then the patriarch turned his gaze to me. Toscano, he said, voice heavy. You understand your responsibility. I held his gaze and answered calmly. I understand. He nodded, pleased. Then he added, the family will be monitoring. Time is not generous. Monitoring. I felt Francesca go still beneath my hand, and something cold inside me sharpened. Monitoring my house. Monitoring my wife. Monitoring the bed. The audacity. The patriarch sat down, satisfied again. The room exhaled. People resumed smiling. The music started again, and the lie continued. Francesca's voice came low beside me. Monitoring. I looked down at her. Yes. Her jaw flexed. So they'll track my cycle. My food. My sleep. Yes. Her eyes burned. And you'll allow it. I held her gaze for a beat too long, then said the truth. I will allow nothing in my house that I do not control. She stared at me, confusion flickering. You're still doing it, she said. You're still taking you. I finished. Yes, she snapped. I leaned closer, voice low. I took your name from them. I said, that part is done. Her breath hitched. Then her voice turned sharp. You didn't take it from them. They handed it to you. I didn't deny it. Denial would insult her intelligence. They handed you to me. I corrected. Not the name. Her eyes narrowed. What's the difference? The difference, I said, is what happens when they try to reach for you after today. Her throat moved. She didn't look away. Good, because this marriage was not a love match. But it was still a battlefield, and I wanted her to understand who the perimeter belonged to. A man approached again, Bernadello legal counsel, carrying a thin folder. Signor Toscano, he began, smiling too politely. We need to review the household oversight schedule and… I turned slightly, placing my body between the lawyer and Francesca. The lawyer stopped, smile faltering. I kept my voice calm. You don't schedule my house. He swallowed. It's agreed. It's assumed. I corrected. And assumptions get people embarrassed. The lawyer's cheeks flushed. He lowered his voice. The patriarch will not be pleased. I looked at him, and in that look, I made the rule clear without shouting. I don't care, I said. The lawyer's mouth opened, closed. Then he nodded, stiff, and backed away like he'd just touched a wire. Francesca watched the exchange. Eyes sharp. You're making enemies, she murmured. They were already enemies. I replied. She inhaled slowly. Then what are you making? I looked down at her. A line, I said. She stared at me for a long moment, then said quietly, and where does that line put me? My hand slid from her lower back to her waist, deliberate, visible. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't meant to be. It was a claim. With me, I said. Her throat tightened. She didn't soften, but she didn't pull away either. That mattered more than any smile. We left the reception early, not because we were romantic, because I refused to let my wife be devoured by congratulations that sounded like ownership. The car ride back to my estate was silent. Francesca sat rigid beside me, staring out the window like she was memorizing the route in case she needed to run. I watched her reflection in the glass. Her face was calm. Her eyes were not. When we arrived, the gates opened immediately. Guards snapped to attention. The staff inside the foyer waited in a neat line like this was normal. Francesca stepped into the house and stopped. She felt it immediately, the shift. Different heir. Different rules. Different owner. She looked up at the ceiling. The lights. The cameras tucked into corners like silent eyes. Surveillance. She turned to me slowly. They're watching. Yes, I said. Her voice was quiet. Are you? I met her gaze. Then I said the truth that would make this marriage far worse than the contract. Yes. Her nostrils flared. So there's no privacy. I didn't pretend there was. No, she let out a small, sharp laugh. At least you're honest. Honesty is not kindness. Honesty is control. I walked past her and motioned for the staff to leave. They moved fast. Efficient. Silent. Good. I turned to Raphael. Clear the wing. Raphael nodded once. Yes, signore. Within minutes. The hallway emptied. Only the cameras remained my cameras. Not Bernardello. Mine. Francesca's gaze. Followed the staff as they disappeared. Then she looked back at me. What now? She asked, voice low. I held her eyes and didn't soften the answer. Now you learn the rules of my house. I said. Her jaw tightened. And the rules of your bed. I stepped closer. The air tightened between us. Yes, I said. Her eyes burned. Is that supposed to scare me? I answered honestly. It should. Silence. Then she lifted her chin. Defiance sharp as a blade. It doesn't. She lied. I didn't call her on it. I turned and walked toward the corridor that led to the master suite. Come, I said. Her heels clicked behind me, measured. Controlled, refusing to sound rushed. When we reached the suite door, I paused with my hand on the handle. I didn't open it immediately. I looked at her instead. Her dress shimmered under the light. Her mouth was neutral. Her eyes were furious. A bride in silk. A prisoner in pearls. A woman who refused to look breakable. I spoke quietly. Italian threaded through it like a warning. Listen to me, Francesca. I said. Ascoltami. Her gaze sharpened. I'm listening. I held her eyes. The family thinks this room belongs to them. I said. They think your body is theirs to schedule. Her throat moved. I continued. Voice calm. They are wrong. Her breath hitched. I opened the door. The room waited inside, bed made perfectly. Lights low. Silence heavy. Francesca stepped over the threshold and stopped again. The cameras weren't visible in here. But she still felt watched. Because the marriage itself was surveillance now. She turned slowly and looked at me. This is the center of it. She whispered. Yes, I said. She swallowed. And you're going to? Not tonight. I cut in. Her eyes widened a fraction. Not relief. Not peace. Suspicion. Not tonight, she repeated. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The click sounded final. Her gaze searched my face for softness. There was none. This is your first night in my house. I said. You will eat. You will sleep. You will understand the perimeter. Her jaw tightened. And tomorrow. I held her gaze. Tomorrow. I said. The deadline begins. Her breath shuddered. So tonight is mercy. I didn't smile. Tonight is preparation. She stared at me like she wanted to spit at my feet. Then she said, voice low, you're still doing it. You're still treating me like a function. I stepped closer until my shadow touched her shoes. No, I said. I'm treating you like a target. Her eyes narrowed. A target. Yes, I said. And targets don't survive when they're exhausted. She swallowed hard. I turned toward the phone on the bedside table and picked it up. One call. Raphael. I said. His voice came instantly. Yes, signore. No one enters this wing. I ordered. No doctors. No Bernardello staff. No family. If they try, you stop them. Raphael didn't hesitate. Yes, signore. I ended the call and looked back at Francesca. Her eyes were sharp now. Measuring. You're cutting them out, she said. I'm cutting them back. I corrected. Her throat moved. And what does that make you? I stepped closer. Voice low. Your husband, I said. And the only man in this house allowed to decide what happens to you. Her breath caught. Fear. Fury. A flicker of something else she would never name. I leaned in just enough to make the next line land like a hook. Get out of that dress, I said calmly. Then lock the door from the inside. Her eyes widened. You want me to lock myself in with you? Yes, I said. Her voice trembled with control. Why? I held her gaze. Because the first rule of surviving this marriage, I said, is understanding that the only privacy you have left is the privacy I defend. Silence. Then, slowly, Francesca reached for the zipper at her back. Not delicate, not shy, controlled, angry. She peeled the dress down like she was stripping off a costume forced on her. She didn't look at me while she did it. I didn't look away. When the dress fell in a soft pool at her feet, she stood in the dim light and finally met my gaze again. Bare shoulders, rigid posture, eyes like a weapon, not offering, not inviting, daring. I stepped closer and reached past her to the lock on the door. I turned it. The sound was small. It felt like a sentence. Francesca's breath hitched. And the chapter ended exactly where it needed to, with the realization settling in her bones as she stared at the bed, that the bedroom wasn't private. It was the center of a succession strategy. And now the door was locked.
Chapter 3. Francesca. The first thing I learned in Lazzaro Toscano's house was that silence isn't privacy. It's surveillance without the courtesy of being seen. I woke to the soft click of a door that wasn't my own hand turning a handle, and for a second my body forgot where I was. The bed was too large, the sheets were too crisp, the air smelled faintly of cedar and cold money, a cage dressed in expensive linen. I sat up, hair spilling over my shoulders, heart already beating, like it knew the day would bruise me. The room was immaculate, no personal objects, no sign of anyone living here, only staying, only occupying, only controlling. The curtains were heavy enough to block the morning light, but the thin slit at the edge of the fabric told me the sun was out there, doing its job without caring what was happening in this bedroom. I swung my feet to the floor and froze. There was a camera, not obvious. Not a black dome in the corner like a cheap hotel pretending to be secure. This one was embedded in the molding near the ceiling, angled perfectly at the bed. My stomach turned. I stared up at it until my eyes burned. Then I did something that felt stupid and necessary at the same time. I lifted my middle finger. The camera didn't flinch, but I felt better. Barely. A soft knock came at the door. Not a servant's nervous tap, a measured knock. The kind you give when you already have permission. "Signora Toscano," a woman's voice said, calm and professional. "May I enter?" Signora Toscano. I swallowed the taste of that new name like it was medicine, and I wasn't sure it would heal or poison. "Yes," I called, voice steady. The door opened and a woman entered pushing a cart. Not breakfast, not flowers. A tray of supplements, a small sealed bottle of water, and a clipboard. She wore a dark uniform, hair pinned tight, expression neutral. The kind of staff member who could pass for invisible until you realized invisibility was a skill. "Good morning," she said. I didn't smile. "Is it?" She didn't react. "Your schedule begins at 8, supplements first." I stared at the pills arranged like a ritual. "I didn't ask for supplements." "They are recommended," she replied, as if recommendation and command were synonyms. I felt my jaw tighten. "Recommended by whom?" The woman's eyes didn't move. "The doctor." "Of course. My body, my schedule, my fertility, already outsourced to strangers." "Where is Lazzaro?" I asked. Her gaze flicked up for the first time, sharp and quick. "He is already awake." Meaning, I was late. A small humiliation, delivered quietly. "Tell him I'll be down when I'm ready," I said. The woman's expression didn't change. "I will inform him you are awake." Not what I said. Not what I asked. Just the fact that I existed. A report. I picked up one of the pills and held it between my fingers. "What is it?" "Prenatal support," she said. I laughed once, sharp. "Support." Her gaze stayed blank. "Yes, Signora." I set the pill down. "I'm not taking anything I didn't choose." For the first time, the woman hesitated. Not fear. Calculation. Because in this house, defiance created paperwork. "I will inform the doctor," she said finally. "Good," I replied. The woman reached for the clipboard. "Breakfast will be served at 8:30. You have an appointment at 9. I stared. "Appointment?" "Yes, Signora, Dr. Venturi." My stomach tightened. Lazzaro had brought my grandfather's doctor into his house, or my grandfather had installed him here. Either way, the result was the same. My body would be discussed like an asset in a meeting. I stood. "Tell Dr. Venturi to wait." The woman blinked. "Signora." I said wait, I repeated, quiet and hard. Something in her eyes shifted. Respect, maybe, or simply recognition that I wasn't going to be easy. She nodded once. "As you wish." As you wish. A lie. But at least it sounded like one. When the door closed behind her, I exhaled slowly and pressed my hands to the edge of the dresser. Okay, think. Test the edges. In this house, every inch of freedom would have to be stolen back in small ways. I dressed in a simple black set, pants, blouse, hair pulled back. If they were going to treat me like a strategic object, they weren't getting softness from me. They weren't getting tears. They weren't getting the visual satisfaction of a bride dissolved into obedience. I walked out of the bedroom and immediately met a guard in the hallway. He didn't block me. He didn't speak. He simply existed. A reminder. My footsteps echoed down a corridor that belonged to someone else now. Every painting was chosen for intimidation. Every corner was too clean. There were no family photos, no warmth, no signs of childhood or memory, only control. At the end of the corridor, 2 women waited near the sitting room. One was the staff member from earlier. The other was older, elegant, and cruel without moving a muscle. She wore pearls like a warning. I recognized her from the wedding reception. Lazaro's aunt, a family matriarch, a woman who had survived men like my husband by becoming a quieter version of them. "Francesca," she said, voice smooth. "Welcome to the reality." I didn't bow. "Who are you?" Her smile was small and sharp. "Julia Toscano, Toscano blood." That explained the polish, the power, the entitlement. She looked me over the way women like her appraise competition, not for beauty, but for weakness. "You'll call me Signora Toscano when staff are present," she said. I stared at her. "I'll call you what I choose." The staff member stiffened. Julia's smile widened a fraction. "You have spirit." "I have lungs," I said. "The spirit is optional." Julia laughed softly, not amused, appraising. "You were raised Bernardello. I expected more discipline." My mouth tightened. "I was raised to be useful. That's different." Julia's eyes sharpened. "Careful," she murmured. "That there are rules in this house?" "I'm noticing," I replied. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was offering advice when really she was offering a leash. "The faster you accept your role," she said, "the less painful this will be." I held her gaze. Painful for whom? Her pearls caught the light as she tilted her head. "For you, if you keep mistaking defiance for freedom." I felt heat rise under my skin, but I didn't let it show. "Where is Lazaro?" I asked again. Julia's eyes flicked down the corridor. "In his study, handling business, like a man should." The implication was clear. I was not business. I was biology. I swallowed it like poison and stepped past her. Julia didn't stop me, not because she couldn't, because she wanted to see what I would do. I walked into the sitting room. Breakfast waited on a long table, perfectly arranged. Too much food, too much intention. Everything looked curated for health, fertility, optics. A woman approached with a small notebook. "Signora, your intake." "No," I said. She froze. "Excuse me." "I'm not reporting what I eat to anyone," I said calmly. "Write that down." The woman's eyes darted to the staff member. Fear flickered. Good. Fear meant the system could still be disrupted. I took a plate, selected what I wanted, toast, fruit, black coffee, and sat at the table as if the house belonged to me. It didn't. But posture is power. The staff member from earlier stood near the doorway like she'd been assigned to observe. A guard appeared in the hall beyond, silent as a shadow. I took a sip of coffee and felt a cold wave of humiliation wash through me. Not because of the coffee, because of the audience. This wasn't breakfast. This was inspection. A door opened behind me. Footsteps, measured, controlled. The room's air changed like it responded to him the way weather responds to pressure. Lazaro entered without speaking. Black suit, no tie, sleeves rolled to mid-forearm. He looked like the kind of man who never slept because he didn't trust the world to behave when his eyes were closed. His gaze swept the table, the staff, Julia, and the doorway, then landed on me. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. He stopped at the far end of the table. "Eat," he said. I lifted my coffee. "I am." His eyes dropped to the untouched supplement tray. "Those two." I set the coffee down slowly. "No." Silence tightened. The staff member held her breath. Julia watched with faint interest, like she was attending a show. Lazaro's voice remained calm. "Why?" "Because I didn't choose them," I said. "Because I'm not a project in your house." His eyes sharpened. "You are a target in my house." The words landed like a slap because they were closer to truth than insult. I forced my voice steady, then stopped treating me like I'm fragile. His gaze didn't soften. "Fragile things don't survive here." A beat. Then he spoke again, voice lower. "Venturi is waiting." I kept my tone even. "Then he can wait longer." Lazaro studied me for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded once. "Fine," he said. Julia's brows lifted slightly. The staff member exhaled like she'd been holding air hostage. Lazaro didn't sit. He didn't join me for breakfast like a husband in a normal life. He stood there like a man overseeing a perimeter. After you eat, he said, we go to Venturi. I took another sip of coffee. We. His eyes held mine. Yes, we. It wasn't a romantic inclusion. It was a control statement. I hated that part of me, felt steadier anyway. After breakfast, I walked into the medical room they'd set up in his house, a small examination space with clean counters, sealed instruments, a chair positioned like a throne for someone else to discuss my body. Dr. Venturi stood with his bag open and a file already prepared. I stopped in the doorway. Lazaro stepped behind me close enough that I could feel his body heat at my back. Signora, Dr. Venturi said, professional. Congratulations on your marriage. I stared at him. Are you here to congratulate me or to count my eggs? The doctor blinked. Then he tried to recover with calm. I'm here to ensure your health is optimized. Optimized. Like I was a machine. Lazaro's voice cut in, quiet. Speak. Dr. Venturi cleared his throat and opened the file. Your cycle? No, I said. The doctor paused. I stepped into the room fully, chin lifted. You will not discuss my cycle like I'm not here. Dr. Venturi's gaze flicked to Lazaro, seeking permission. That made something inside me flare. Lazaro didn't answer for him. He looked at me instead. Then speak for yourself. The permission landed strangely, less like kindness, more like a test. I swallowed hard. My cycle is my business, I said, and I will decide what is shared. Dr. Venturi swallowed. Signora, timing is. Lazaro spoke calm. Venturi? The doctor stopped instantly. Lazaro's voice remained flat. Say what you must, briefly, in front of her. Dr. Venturi nodded, then looked at me, trying for professional neutrality. Based on prior records and current tracking, conception probability increases within the next. Stop, I said, my pulse hammered. I forced my voice even. You have no prior records without my consent. Dr. Venturi's mouth parted. Lazaro's eyes narrowed slightly, not at me, at the doctor. Where did you get records? Lazaro asked. The doctor hesitated. I felt the room tighten. Dr. Venturi cleared his throat. Bernadello Council provided. Lazaro's voice dropped into Italian, sharp enough to cut. Basta! Enough. Dr. Venturi went still. Lazaro's gaze turned colder. Leave the file. The doctor blinked. Signore. Leave it, Lazaro repeated. The doctor set the file down with careful hands, then backed away as if the paper itself might bite. When the door closed, silence filled the room. I stared at the file, then at Lazaro. They gave you my medical history. His jaw flexed once, a crack in the ice, not softness, anger. Yes, he said. And you let them, I added, his eyes fixed on mine. They attempted. My throat tightened. That's not an answer. Lazaro stepped closer, stopping just in front of me. He didn't touch me, but his presence did. The Bernardellos don't understand my house, he said quietly. They think they can bring their hands into it. I held my gaze steady. Can they? His eyes went flat. No. Then he did something that made my skin prickle. He picked up the file, opened it, tore it in half, once, twice, paper split, ink destroyed. He dropped the pieces into the trash. My breath caught. Not because I was touched, because for the first time since the war room, someone had taken a piece of control away from my family in front of me. Lazaro looked at me. No records, he said. No files. No doctor speaks about you like you're absent. I swallowed hard. I didn't say thank you. Gratitude would make me vulnerable. So I said the only thing I could trust. Why, I asked. His eyes didn't soften. Because it's my name on you now. That should have made me furious. It did. But it also lit something colder in my chest. Awareness. He wasn't doing this for romance. He was doing it because he didn't share what was his. That kind of protection comes with a price. I stepped back slightly. So I traded one cage for another. Lazaro's gaze held mine. Yes. The honesty hit harder than any lie would have. Then the door opened again, and a man stepped into the corridor outside the medical room, one of Lazaro's inner circle. Young. Confident. Too relaxed. He saw me and smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. Not flirtation exactly, but familiarity that he hadn't earned. Signora Toscano, he said, stepping closer. I'm Matteo. He reached out, too casually, and touched my elbow as if he was guiding me, as if he had the right. Before I could pull away, the air snapped cold. Lazaro moved, one step fast enough to blur, and Matteo's hand was caught. Not crushed, held, stopped. Lazaro's voice was quiet. Don't. Matteo's smile faltered. I was just... Lazaro didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You were just forgetting where your hands belong. Matteo swallowed. Signore, Lazzaro's grip tightened a fraction. Not injury, instruction. Mai, Lazzaro said in Italian. Never. Matteo's eyes widened. He pulled his hand back quickly, posture stiffening. I apologize, Matteo muttered, stepping away. Lazzaro didn't look at him again. He looked at me, and something in his gaze shifted. Not warmth, not romance. Possession, sharp enough to cut. My pulse kicked. I hated that it did. Lazzaro's voice dropped. No one touches you, he said. Not in my house. I swallowed hard. I'm not a painting. His eyes stayed flat. No, you're my wife. The words landed heavy in my chest. I should have told him to go to hell. Instead, I heard myself ask, quieter, do you react like that for the dynasty, or for me? His jaw flexed. A fraction of silence. Then he said, cold and honest, both. Matteo disappeared down the corridor like he'd just seen death. I stood there with my skin prickling, realizing something that made the air feel tighter around my ribs. His control wasn't only structural, it was becoming personal. And if it was personal, then it wasn't just my family I had to fear. It was what it meant to be wanted by a man like Lazzaro Toscano. He turned toward the hallway, motioning me to follow. Back to breakfast, he said. I didn't move immediately. He paused and looked over his shoulder. What? He asked. My voice came out low. You don't get to make me safer by making me smaller. His eyes sharpened. I'm not making you smaller. I lifted my chin, then stopped tightening the leash every time another man breathes near me. His mouth didn't move, but something in his eyes darkened, recognition that I'd seen him clearly. He stepped closer again, just enough to make me feel him. And when he spoke, his voice was calm, deliberate, and terrifying in its certainty. You will understand something, Francesca, he said. In this house, safety is not freedom. I stared at him. He held my gaze a beat too long. Then he added, quieter, Italian threading through it like a command he expected the world to obey. E controllo. It is control. And as we walked out of the medical room, his presence behind me like a shadow I couldn't escape, the truth settled into my bones with brutal clarity. The surveillance wasn't just cameras. It was him. And his possessiveness sharpened the moment another man tried to touch me, as if the marriage had already shifted from dynasty strategy into something far more dangerous, something personal.
Chapter 4. Lazzaro the house turned her body into a calendar. By noon, everyone knew. Not the guests. Not the public, my staff. My security. The Bernadello medical liaison, who still had the arrogance to stand in my hallway like my walls belonged to him. Even Julia. Watching from the edges with that elegant cruelty women learn when they survive men like me. They didn't say it out loud in front of Francesca. They didn't have to. They spoke in glances. In the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. In the way a tray of food arrived with ingredients chosen like spells. It wasn't breakfast. It was a fertility plan served on porcelain. And I was expected to be the man who followed it. Raphael stood in my study with a tablet in his hand and murder in his eyes. Venturi says tonight. He said. I didn't look up from the document I was pretending to read. I already heard. They also scheduled a second appointment at 2100. He added. That got my attention. I lifted my gaze. Who scheduled? Raphael's mouth tightened. Bernadello Council. They tried to push an addendum, monitoring. Confirmation. Post-coital. Stop. I said, voice flat. Raphael stopped. My jaw clenched until it hurt. The audacity. To bring their hands into my bed. To put a clock on my wife's body and act like they had the right to stand there and watch the outcome. They're forgetting something. I said. Raphael's eyes stayed hard. Your name? Yes. I replied. And my temper. Raphael hesitated. Do you want me to remove them? After dinner. I said. Raphael's brows lifted. Not before. No. I said. I want them to see her walk into my wing untouched. Raphael understood immediately. A message. Delivered without violence. He nodded once. And afterward. I confirmed. He shifted his weight. She knows. She always knows. I said. That was the problem. Francesca didn't pretend. She didn't soften. She didn't make it easy for anyone, including me, to treat her like a function without seeing the person inside the function fighting back. Raphael's voice lowered. Julia has been hovering. She's pressuring her. My fingers tightened on the paper. Julia will learn to stop. Raphael nodded once. Then he added, carefully, this is the first night. The first attempt. I didn't need him to remind me. The house wasn't waiting for romance. The dynasty was waiting for proof. I stood, jacket already feeling too tight, as if fabric could contain the edge in my body. Clear the West Hall. I ordered. No staff. No doctors. No Bernadello, anyone. Raphael's eyes sharpened. Yes, signore. And Raphael. I added, voice colder. He paused. If anyone tries to enter my wing tonight. I said, I want their name. Raphael nodded once. Yes, and I want them gone by morning. He didn't blink. Understood. When he left, the study went silent again. I stared at the wall for a long beat, breathing slow. Control is easy when it's only business. Control becomes something else when it's attached to a woman who looks at you like a prison and still refuses to kneel. I left the study and moved through my house. It looked the same as always, clean, quiet, built for intimidation. But the air felt different now, because she was in it, because my name was on her, because the dynasty had turned her body into a deadline and expected me to treat it like logistics. I found her in the dining room. She was standing near the window, wineglass untouched in front of her, posture too rigid for a woman in a gown meant to impress. Julia sat at the far end of the table like a queen in a quiet war, pearl earrings catching the light. Francesca's gaze flicked to me when I entered. No relief, no appeal, just controlled fury. Julia smiled faintly. Lazzaro. I ignored her and looked at Francesca. Come, I said. Julia's smile sharpened. Dinner is finished. I cut in. Julia's eyes narrowed. She hasn't eaten. Francesca's mouth tightened. I'm not hungry. That was a lie. I'd watched her barely touch food for 2 days, refusing the system, refusing the humiliation, refusing the reality that her body would be discussed whether she fed it or not. Julia leaned back. She must maintain her strength. Francesca's eyes flashed. Don't talk about my strength like it belongs to you. Julia's gaze stayed smooth. Everything in this family belongs to. Enough, I said. The air snapped tight. Julia looked at me, offended. You forget who arranged. I don't forget. I replied. I refuse. Her eyes widened a fraction. Good. I turned to Francesca. Eat. I said quietly. Her chin lifted. No, the refusal was sharp. Proud. I stepped closer until my presence crowded her air. Francesca. I said, voice low, Italian threading through it like a private command. Mangia. Eat. Her eyes narrowed. Don't command me in Italian like it makes it romantic. It isn't romantic. I said. It's necessary. She swallowed hard, anger burning behind her eyes. Then, slowly, like it cost her pride, she reached for a piece of bread and took a bite. Julia watched. Satisfied. I looked at Julia. That satisfaction was her mistake. Leave. I said. Julia's smile froze. Excuse me. Now. I repeated. Julia's eyes went cold. You're making this difficult. I'm making it private. I corrected. Her voice lowered. Venomous. Privacy is a luxury. I stepped closer to the table. Gaze flat. Not in my house. Julia held my stare for a long beat. Then she stood, smoothing her dress like she hadn't just lost a battle. As you wish, she said, and the words were poison. She walked out. The door closed. Silence. Francesca set the bread down slowly, hands steady, but her breathing wasn't. You didn't have to do that, she said. I watched her. Yes, I did. Her eyes flashed. Because she was humiliating me. Yes. And because, she hesitated. Then her voice went sharper. Because you don't like anyone else talking about me like that. I didn't answer. Answering would have been admitting something I didn't want to name yet. So I did what I always do. I moved. Come. I said again. She didn't move immediately. Why? She asked, voice low. Why tonight? I held her gaze. Because the family will escalate if you delay. And you care what they want. She snapped. I stepped closer until there was no space left for her anger to hide behind. I care what they'll do if you refuse. I said. Her breath hitched. She stared at me for a long beat. Then whispered. So this is protection. No. I said. Her eyes narrowed. Then what is it? I lowered my voice. This is obligation. The honesty made her flinch. Good. Truth is the only thing that survives in dynasties. She nodded once, jaw tight, and followed me out of the dining room. Her heels clicked behind me, measured, controlled, like she refused to let the walk look like surrender. We reached the west wing. My wing. The guards moved aside without speaking. The corridor was empty. As ordered, no staff. No doctors. No Bernadello hands lingering. Francesca paused when we reached the suite door. Her gaze lifted to the molding. She'd seen the cameras in other parts of the house. She expected them here too. There aren't any, I said before she could speak. Her eyes snapped to mine. Why? Because this room belongs to me, I replied. Not the dynasty. Her throat tightened. I unlocked the door and opened it. The room was dim. Quiet. The bed made perfectly. Sheets too crisp. Like everything else in my house. Order disguised as comfort. Francesca stepped inside and stood near the foot of the bed again. Like the bed was an altar. Like she'd rather bleed than cross it. I closed the door behind us. The click sounded final. She turned slowly, eyes bright with contained fury. Don't pretend this is anything else, she said. I won't, I replied. Her chin lifted. Good. Silence stretched. Then she said, voice low, tell me what you expect. I didn't waste words. Tonight is an attempt. Her jaw clenched. An attempt. Yes, I said. Not a romance. Not a seduction. Not a fantasy. Her lips parted, then pressed together hard. So I'm supposed to lie here and… I stepped closer. Voice calm. You're supposed to survive this without letting them see you break. Her eyes flashed. You think I'll break? I held her gaze. I think they want you to. A beat. Then her voice dropped. And you? I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was ugly and precise. I didn't agree to this marriage to want her. I agreed because the alliance required it. Because the dynasty required it. Because I could take control of the succession line by taking her. But wanting was not part of the plan. Wanting was liability. And Francesca Bernardello had already become one. I will remain in control, I said finally. Her eyes narrowed. That's not reassuring. It's the only thing that keeps you safe, I replied. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, with a sharp inhale, she began unfastening her dress. Not delicately, not shyly, angrily, as if every hook was another insult she was ripping away. She didn't look at me while she did it. She refused. I didn't move. I watched her hands, the tension in her shoulders, the way her breathing stayed too controlled. When the dress fell to the floor, she stood in the dim light with her spine straight, eyes hard, a woman turning herself into a weapon because the world kept trying to make her a vessel. Do you want me to lie down? She asked, voice sharp. I stepped closer. Look at me. Her eyes snapped up. Don't make this clinical, I said quietly. Her laugh was bitter. It's literally clinical. No, I said. It's political. The difference mattered. Clinical makes you feel like an object. Political makes you feel like a hostage. Both are humiliating, but one leaves room for power. I reached out, not to grab, to touch. My fingers came under her chin, tilting her face up. Her breath hitched. The same gesture from the war room. But here, in the dim light of my bedroom, it felt different, more intimate, more dangerous. You're not a schedule, I said. Her eyes narrowed. Then what am I? I held her gaze. My wife. Her throat tightened. Her lips parted like she wanted to spit something sharp. Instead, she whispered, and the heir. I didn't lie. Also, her eyes flashed with pain. I should have stepped back. I didn't. My thumb brushed once at her jawline, small, controlled. She went still. Say what you need to say, I murmured. Her voice trembled with control. I hate this. I nodded once. I know. And I hate that my body is, she swallowed hard, public. My jaw tightened. Not in this room. Her eyes searched mine for a lie. I didn't give her one. She exhaled sharply, then lifted her chin higher like she was bracing for impact. Then do it, she said, voice low, before I lose my nerve and tear your throat out. A flicker, barely visible, moved through my eyes. Amusement, maybe, or admiration, or the beginning of something worse. I stepped closer, close enough that her breath warmed my mouth. And I kissed her. Not gentle, not violent, controlled. A kiss that said, this is happening, and I will not pretend it's sweet. For a second, she went rigid. Then her hands came up, grabbing my shirt like she was angry at it. Angry at me. Angry at herself. She kissed me back. Not softly. Not romantically. Like defiance and need had tangled into the same rope. I broke the kiss only long enough to breathe. You're angry, I murmured. Yes, she whispered. breath shaking. Stay angry. I said. Don't disappear. Her fingers tightened in my shirt. I kissed her again, deeper, and felt her body react, breath hitching, spine tightening, then loosening by degrees as her pride fought her hunger and lost ground inch by inch. Her nails scraped lightly at my collar. A warning. A claim. Both. I moved her backward, guiding, not dragging, until the back of her knees hit the edge of the bed. She didn't fall. She sat with control, eyes burning up at me like she refused to be placed. Good. I didn't want her passive. Passive breaks. Passive becomes replaceable. Francesca wasn't replaceable. Not to the dynasty. And, worse, more dangerous, maybe not to me either. I knelt in front of her, keeping my hands at her waist, anchoring, steadying, letting her feel that I could take more, and I was choosing not to rush. Her breath stuttered. What are you doing? She whispered, voice tight. Keeping you here. I said, with me, not with them. Her throat moved as she swallowed. I kissed her again, slow, deliberate, and felt her hands clutch my shoulders like she needed an anchor, even while she hated needing anything. This wasn't tenderness. This was collision. Anger, fear, hunger, pride, everything in her that refused to kneel and everything in her that wanted to be held steady. I stayed in control. Not because I wanted obedience, because if I lost control, I would take too much, and she would hate herself for giving it. I wouldn't do that to her. Not tonight. My hands slid along her sides, over skin and the edge of fabric, grounding her. Her breathing turned fast and shallow, eyes glass bright with effort not to fall apart. Look at me, I said softly. She did, and in her gaze I saw the fear she never showed anyone else, the fear of being reduced, used, discarded once the job was done. I lowered my mouth to hers again and kissed her like a promise I wasn't allowed to make out loud. Her body finally tipped, tension breaking, a tremor moving through her like a confession she didn't want to give. She made a small, broken sound, half anger, half relief. I held her through it, not letting her disappear, not letting her apologize, not letting her turn it into shame. When it ended, she stayed rigid for a beat, breath ragged, eyes wide as if she didn't recognize the woman who'd just reacted like that. I didn't give her space to spiral. I pulled her into me and held her with my face pressed into her hair, one arm around her waist, firm and steady, keeping her close like the world couldn't reach through my body. She stiffened. Then, slowly, like it cost her pride, she let her weight settle into my chest a fraction. A tiny surrender. Not to love, to safety. I spoke into her hair. Quiet, Italian threaded through it. Sei al sicuro. I murmured. You're safe. Her hands stayed on my shoulders, fingers tight. She didn't speak, but she didn't pull away either. I stayed there, holding her, until her breathing slowed, until the shake in her body eased, until her pride stopped bracing for impact. Aftercare wasn't romance. It was containment. It was making sure she didn't leave this room feeling like she'd been used and discarded, because if she left feeling discarded, the dynasty would have already won. Finally, she whispered, voice hoarse, is that it? The question was a knife. Not because she wanted more, because she expected to be sent away, expected to be dismissed like a task completed. I lifted my head and looked at her. No, I said. Her eyes narrowed, wary. I shifted carefully and lay back on the bed, keeping her against me, her head near my shoulder, my arm around her waist. She stiffened again, then slowly settled, as if her body didn't know what to do with being kept. Sleep, I said. Her laugh was quiet and bitter. Sleep. Yes, I replied. Your body needs it. She looked up at me, eyes sharp. So now you care about my body. I held her gaze. I care about you being alive. A beat. Then she whispered, almost to herself. That's not the same as being free. No, I agreed. It's better than being dead. Silence. Her breathing deepened, slow and unwilling. But she didn't move away. She stayed, trapped between resentment and the fact that my arm around her felt like a barrier against everything outside this door. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, and felt the shift inside myself like a crack forming in stone. I was not supposed to want this. Not this closeness. Not this weight. Not this woman who refused to soften and still managed to make my control feel like the only safe thing in her world. The house would wake tomorrow and start counting again. The dynasty would whisper about timing, windows, deadlines. But in my bed, my wife lay against my chest like she belonged there, not as a vessel, but as a person. And that thought was the most dangerous one I'd had in years, because it wasn't strategic. It was personal, and personal makes men like me do stupid things. Like keep her, like linger, like forget that this was supposed to be a clean arrangement. Francesca's voice came, small and sharp in the darkness. Lazaro. Yes, I said, if you ever let them watch me. She whispered, I'll kill you first. A small, cold smile touched my mouth. Bene, I murmured. Good. She made a quiet sound, half outrage, half exhaustion. Then she went still again, breath softening against my chest. And I stayed awake long after her, arm tight around her waist, listening to the house settle outside the door. Because now the contract wasn't just ink. It was a body in my bed, and I was already too far gone to pretend I'd let her be treated like a deadline ever again. When morning came, the first thing the dynasty would ask wasn't how she slept. It would be whether it worked. And the answer, whatever it was, would change everything. That was the hook. That was the war. And I was done being polite about it.
Chapter 5. Francesca. By the third morning in Lazzaro Toscano's house, my cycle was no longer mine. It belonged to the hallway, to the staff who stopped speaking when I walked past, then resumed in whispers the second I turned a corner, to the kitchen that served me meals like prescriptions, to the guards who didn't look at me directly, as if looking was intimacy and intimacy was above their pay grade, to the women. Women were the worst part, because women knew exactly how to make a cage feel like etiquette. Signora, the same staff woman said, placing a porcelain tray on the breakfast table like she was presenting a crown. Your supplements. I stared at them. They weren't hidden in a cabinet. They weren't offered quietly. They were displayed, a public reminder of what I was here for. Across the room, Giulia Toscano stood near the window with a coffee cup in her hand, watching me like a teacher waiting for a student to fail. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence said, "Take them. Prove you understand your role." I sat down without touching the tray. I reached for my coffee first because small acts of choice were the only freedom I could still carve out. The cup was hot. The bitterness steadied me. "Dr. Venturi will see you at 9, the staff woman added, as if she was reading weather, not scheduling my body. I didn't look up. "Tell him I'm not coming." The woman's posture stiffened. Her eyes flicked to Giulia automatically. Giulia's mouth curved faintly. "You're coming," she said, finally speaking. I lifted my gaze to her. "Are you my doctor now?" Giulia's smile didn't change. "No, I'm your reality." I took another sip of coffee. "Then you should know I don't respond well to being managed." Giulia walked closer, heels quiet on the marble. Her pearls caught the light and made her look expensive, and expense was always the costume people wore when they wanted to hide their cruelty behind refinement. "You will respond," she said calmly, "because the patriarch is not getting better." The word patriarch landed like a weight. My grandfather was dying. That was the story they'd used to justify everything. Every humiliation, every appointment, every whispered comment about timing. I could feel my jaw tighten. That isn't my problem. Giulia's eyes sharpened. "It is, whether you pretend it is or not." I set the cup down slowly. "The problem is that everyone in this house speaks about my body like it's a public resource." Giulia leaned slightly closer, voice lowering like she was offering private wisdom. "Because it is." My stomach turned. I forced my voice steady. "You say that like you're proud." Giulia's gaze went distant for a beat. Something old, flickering behind her eyes. Then the mask returned, polished and hard. "I say it because pretending otherwise will only get you hurt." I didn't answer. I stared at the supplement tray and felt the humiliation rise like heat under my skin. It wasn't the pills themselves, it was the meaning. You will comply, you will produce, you will be measured. "Take them," Giulia said. "No." Her smile tightened. "Do you think defiance changes what's expected?" I met her gaze. "I think defiance is the only thing they haven't managed to steal yet." Giulia held my stare. Then she exhaled softly as if I was exhausting her. "You're playing with the wrong man," she murmured. I laughed once, sharp. "I'm married to him. I'm not playing." Giulia's eyes flicked toward the hallway, the direction of Lazzaro's study. "You think he will shield you," she said quietly. "He will not. He is a Toscano." I didn't look away. "And you think I'm a Bernardello?" Giulia's mouth curved again. "Yes." That's why they chose you. Chose. Not asked. Not loved. Chosen like an asset. She turned and walked out before I'd respond, leaving the air colder behind her. The staff woman remained, hands clasped, waiting. Tell Dr. Venturi I'm not coming, I repeated. The woman swallowed. Signora, he has orders. I stared at her. So do I. She hesitated. Then she nodded once. Yes, Signora. She left. I sat alone with the supplements and the silence, and the knowledge that my refusal wouldn't stop the machinery. It would just make the machinery tighten. I didn't take the pills. Not because they would harm me, because taking them felt like surrendering the last inch of ownership I had left. I stood and walked out of the dining room. 2 guards shifted in the corridor, subtle, practiced. My movements were tracked, my choices recorded. Surveillance bride, I wasn't imagining it. I was living it. And the worst part was the way my body adapted. The way my breathing changed in halls. The way my shoulders hardened as if I could armor myself against being watched. You can't armor a womb. That was the point. I turned down the corridor that led to the sitting room and stopped short. A woman sat there that hadn't been there yesterday. Blonde. Elegant. A cream dress that looked like innocence paired with a stare that could cut glass. Her posture was perfect. Her smile was polite enough to be poisonous. She rose when she saw me, as if she'd been waiting. Francesca, she said, pronouncing my name like it belonged to her mouth. Finally. I didn't step closer. Who are you? Her smile widened just a fraction. Vittoria Alighieri. The name carried weight. Money. An old family that didn't get invited into Toscano territory unless they were either trusted or necessary. She extended her hand. I looked at it. Then I looked at her eyes. I didn't take it. Her smile didn't falter. It sharpened. How sudden this must be for you, she said. A whole new world. This world isn't new, I replied. It's just not mine. Vittoria's gaze flicked over me. Black pants, simple blouse, hair pulled back. No softness, no bridal glow. I expected lace, she said lightly. I expected privacy, I answered. Her laugh was quiet. Privacy. She sat again, crossing her legs slowly. How charming. She leaned back as if she owned the room, as if she was the one with the ring. I knew Lazzaro would marry, she said. Eventually, I just didn't expect. Her gaze slid over me again. You. The insult was elegant. That was what made it lethal. I kept my voice calm. Then you should leave. Disappointment is easier to handle at your own address. Vittoria's eyes flashed. You're bold. I'm honest, I corrected. She tilted her head, studying me like she was deciding where to push. And are you already trying? My skin went cold. There it was. The fertility clock, spoken aloud, as if my body was a topic anyone could bring up over coffee. I don't discuss my sex life with strangers, I said. Vittoria smiled as if I'd amused her. In this world, nothing is private. You'll learn. I learned quickly, I replied. Good, she murmured. Then learn this. You are valuable until you succeed. After that, she shrugged delicately. Dynasties have short memories for women. A flare of rage shot through me. I kept it under my tongue. You're speaking like someone with experience, I said. Vittoria's smile turned thin. I'm speaking like someone who expected to be in your place. Ah, there it was. Not jealousy because she loved him. Jealousy because she'd wanted the power that came with him. And I was wearing it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Then you should know something. Vittoria's eyes narrowed. What? I don't plan to be disposable, I said. She laughed softly. Plans don't matter when men like Lazzaro decide. My throat tightened. Before I could answer, the hallway air shifted. Footsteps approached, measured, controlled, the kind of footsteps that changed rooms before the man even arrived. Lazzaro entered the sitting room without looking at Vittoria first. His gaze went to me, then to the distance between me and her, then to Vittoria's posture, too relaxed, too familiar. His eyes cooled further. Vittoria stood smoothly, smile bright. Lazzaro, he didn't smile back. Vittoria, she moved closer, closing space like she believed she still had access. You didn't tell me you'd married so quickly. I didn't consult you, he replied. Her smile faltered, just a fraction. She recovered instantly, turning her attention to me again with that same polite poison. Francesca and I were just talking. Lazzaro's gaze sharpened. About what? Vittoria's smile widened. The adjustment. She glanced down at my stomach as if she could see inside me. Timeline. My breath caught. Lazzaro's eyes went flat. A dangerous calm settled on him. He stepped closer and placed his hand at my waist. Not gentle, not affectionate, territorial, The touch wasn't for me, it was for her. Vittoria's gaze flicked to his hand. Something tight flashed across her face. Possession is loud even when no one speaks. I see, Vittoria said softly. Lazaro didn't take his hand away. You should. Vittoria's smile turned brittle. You're very invested. His voice didn't change. She is my wife. Vittoria lifted her chin, and the family's solution. I felt the words like a slap. Lazaro's fingers tightened slightly at my waist. He looked at Vittoria the way a man looks at a problem he's deciding how to remove. Watch your mouth, he said. Vittoria's eyes widened. Excuse me? You heard me, Lazaro replied. You don't speak about her like she's a plan. Vittoria's smile turned sharp again. Isn't she? Silence snapped tight. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Lazaro's voice stayed calm. No. Vittoria laughed lightly, trying to regain control. Lazaro, don't pretend you married her for... He didn't let her finish. Leave, he said. Vittoria froze. This is my house, he cut in. And you are done speaking. Her mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at me, anger, humiliation, calculation. Then she smoothed her dress and walked out without another word. The moment she disappeared, the room exhaled. Lazaro's hand remained at my waist. I hated that my body responded to the steadiness of it. I hated that part of me felt safer with his touch there than without it. I looked at him. She thinks I'm temporary. His gaze didn't soften. She doesn't matter. She matters if she's here, I snapped. His hand slid slightly, fingers firm at my side. She's here because the Bernardellos invited her. My stomach turned. Of course they did. He watched me for a beat. They want you rattled. I swallowed hard. Because it worked. The words Vittoria had thrown, valuable until you succeed, had landed in the deepest wound my family had carved into me. Replaceable. Disposable. My voice came lower. And if I don't conceive fast enough. Lazaro's gaze sharpened, not with pity, but with something darker. They'll pressure, he said. They'll humiliate. They'll threaten. I stared at him. And you'll let them. His eyes went flat. No. One word. Final. I exhaled slowly. Then I asked the question that had been building in my throat since the war room. Why, I said. Why do you care what they say about me? Lazaro's jaw flexed. A beat of silence. Then he spoke, voice low. Because I don't share what is mine. The words should have disgusted me. They did. They also lit something sharp inside my chest, because no one had ever claimed me like that before. Not in a way that felt like protection instead of transaction. I pulled away from his hand slightly, reclaiming space. I'm not property. His gaze held mine. In this world, you are. I felt my nails bite into my palm. Then I'll burn the world down. A flicker moved through his eyes. Approval, interest, something dangerous. Good, he said quietly. The sound of heels returned from the corridor. Not Vittoria, Julia. She entered with a man beside her, older, expensive suit, the kind of face that smiled in public and tore people apart in private. My uncle. He looked at me like I was a ledger entry. Francesca, he said, voice too bright. There you are. I didn't smile. What do you want? He chuckled as if I'd made a joke. We're having lunch. The patriarch wants to see you. My stomach turned. My grandfather's condition was worsening and they were using it like a whip. I looked at Lazaro. I'm not a show pony. My uncle's smile tightened. Your family. Lazaro spoke. Calm. She'll come when she's ready. My uncle's eyes narrowed slightly. This is Bernardello business, Toscano. The way he said Toscano was contempt disguised as politeness. Lazaro's gaze went colder. She is my wife. Julia's eyes flicked between them, pleased by tension. My uncle smiled, too smooth. Of course, that's why we need her present. Present. Not cared for. Not asked. Displayed. I inhaled slowly. Fine. My uncle's relief was immediate. Excellent. Lazaro's gaze snapped to me. I met it. I'm not going because they command me, I said quietly. I'm going because I want to look my grandfather in the face when he talks about my womb like it's his. Lazaro's jaw flexed. Then he nodded once. Good. The Bernardello estate smelled like old power and rotting loyalty. They'd seated everyone in the formal dining hall as if this was a celebration and not a funeral in slow motion. My grandfather sat at the head of the table with oxygen at his nose, eyes still sharp. People rose when I entered. Not for me. For the idea of me. The heir maker. The solution. Lazaro walked beside me, hand at my waist again. Visible, territorial. My grandfather's gaze fixed on it. A faint smile touched his mouth. He liked the control. He liked seeing his plan in motion. I wanted to spit. We sat, Lunch was served in courses that felt absurdly luxurious against the ugliness of the conversation. The patriarch's voice was calm. "We're running out of time." My uncle nodded. "Yes, father." My aunt dabbed at her mouth as if pretending this was normal. My grandfather's eyes turned to me. "Francesca." I met his gaze without blinking. "Grandfather." He tilted his head. "Are you cooperating?" There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Are you settling?" Cooperating. I kept my voice steady. "I'm here." "That wasn't the question," he said. Silence tightened. Lazzaro's hand stayed firm at my waist, but he didn't speak. He let me answer. "Good. I'm doing what you demanded," I said. My grandfather's gaze narrowed. "Demands preserve empires." "Demands destroy daughters," I replied. A murmur rippled down the table. My aunt inhaled sharply. My uncle's face went red. My grandfather didn't flinch. "Daughters are temporary," he said. "Legacy is not." My stomach twisted. Then, worse, someone at the far end laughed quietly. A man I barely recognized, one of my grandfather's advisors, leaned toward another and said, not quite under his breath, "She'll do her job. Broodmares always do." The word hit the room like a match. Broodmare. My skin went icy. I went perfectly still, because if I reacted, they'd call it volatility. If I cried, they'd call it weakness. If I stood, they'd call it hysteria. So I stayed frozen, dignity as a weapon. I didn't look at my grandfather. I looked at the man who said it. His smile was smug, comfortable in the belief that women like me had no consequences to deliver. Then Lazzaro moved, so fast the room barely registered it until the sound happened. A glass shattered, not thrown, crushed in his hand. The crack of it cut through the table conversation like gunfire. Everyone went silent. My grandfather's eyes sharpened. Lazzaro rose slowly, blood beating at his palm, dripping onto the white cloth like a warning. He didn't shout. He didn't swear. He looked at the advisor with terrifying calm. "Say it again," he said. The advisor swallowed. "Signor Toscano, it was—" "Say it," Lazzaro repeated. The man's mouth opened, closed. He couldn't, because the room had changed, the air had changed. The dynasty had just watched Lazzaro Toscano bleed without blinking. And men like that don't bleed unless they're ready to kill. My uncle stood quickly, trying to control the scene. "Lazzaro, please." Lazzaro didn't look at him. He didn't look at my grandfather. He only looked at the advisor. "My wife," he said calmly, "is not your vocabulary." The advisor's face went pale. Lazzaro took one step closer to the table. Blood dripped again. "My wife," he repeated, "is not your joke." The advisor trembled. "I apologize." Lazzaro tilted his head. "To her." The advisor's eyes flicked to me. Fear, shame, resentment. He swallowed hard. "Signora, I apologize." I didn't nod. I didn't accept. I simply watched him like he was small, because he was. Lazzaro turned his gaze finally to my grandfather. The patriarch's eyes were cold, but there was a crack of surprise there, too. Lazzaro's voice stayed even. "You want an heir," he said. "Then you will speak of the mother with respect." My grandfather's nostrils flared. "You forget your place." Lazzaro's mouth didn't move. "No." That single word held a war inside it. My uncle tried again, voice strained. "This isn't." "It is." Lazzaro cut in, and for the first time his voice carried enough edge to make the room flinch. "You brought her here to remind her she's a function. I'm reminding you she's my wife." Silence. My grandfather's gaze held Lazzaro's. A long, dangerous beat. Then my grandfather leaned back slowly, oxygen hissing, eyes still sharp. "Fine," he said, as if granting permission. "Respect." Lazzaro didn't sit immediately. He looked at the advisor one last time, voice flat. "If you speak about her like that again," he said, "you will not have a mouth to apologize with." The advisor went white. Lazzaro sat. His hand returned to my waist, steady, territorial, calm. And the worst part was the way my body reacted. Not to the threat, to the protection, to being defended in a room where I'd spent my whole life being measured and bartered. I hated that my throat tightened. I hated that my eyes stung. I refused to cry. I turned my face slightly toward him and whispered, voice low, "You didn't have to do that." His gaze stayed forward. "Yes, I did." My breath shook. "Why?" His answer came without softness. "Because they're getting too comfortable," he said, "and because you're not theirs to degrade anymore." The words landed in my chest like a brand. Not love, not kindness. Claim. And claim was terrifying. But in that room, surrounded by people who'd reduced me to a womb with a deadline, it felt like the first real boundary anyone had ever drawn around me. The lunch continued after that, awkward, careful, everyone choosing words like they could explode. My grandfather spoke of legacy and succession. My uncle nodded. My aunt pretended none of this was monstrous. I barely tasted the food. All I could feel was the place where Lazaro's hand rested at my waist, steady and possessive. A line, a warning, a promise. When the lunch finally ended, Lazaro stood first. He didn't ask permission. He didn't wait for dismissal. He guided me out with his hand at my back like he was moving a valuable thing through enemy territory. Because he was. Outside, in the cold air of the estate courtyard, I finally exhaled. My breath shook. Not tears. Release. Lazaro looked down at his hand, still bleeding slightly from the crushed glass. I stared at it. You hurt yourself, I said. He didn't look at the blood. It doesn't matter. It does, I snapped, anger rising because it was safer than gratitude. You can't keep doing that. His gaze flicked to mine, cold. In 10, he said. Then, quieter, and I will. My swallow hook had already sunk in deep. My family had turned me into a deadline. But my husband had just made it clear, publicly, violently, that no one was allowed to degrade his wife and walk away untouched. And if he was willing to bleed for that line, what would he be willing to do when the family tried to take more than words?
Chapter 6. Lazaro. The first time I changed the rules. I didn't announce it. I just removed the key. The Bernadello medical liaison arrived at my gate at 7:15 with a briefcase, and the kind of smile men where when they think a contract gives them access. My guard didn't open the gate. He didn't even speak. He just stared until the man's smile died. Raphael appeared on the security feed beside me. Face blank. He's requesting entry. Refuse. I said. He claims authority from the patriarch. Raphael added. I didn't blink. He can claim anything. He's still outside. A beat. Then Raphael's voice lowered. He's escalating. I watched the man outside lift his phone and dial. He paced like the world owed him movement. Like my house was a hallway in the Bernardello estate. He was about to learn the difference. Let him call. I said. Raphael hesitated. He'll call the patriarch. Yes, I replied. And the patriarch will learn there are now 2 dying men in this alliance. One with oxygen and one with delusions. Raphael's mouth twitched once. Not quite a smile. Understood. I ended the feed and turned away from the screens. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a house that had become a calendar. My staff moved softly, trained not to make noise. My guards stood like shadows. The cameras watched everything and showed nothing unless I asked. And somewhere upstairs, my wife was awake. I knew because I'd already read the report. Not because I needed one, because in my own house, the air changed when Francesca moved through it. It was subtle, like the tension in the walls adjusted around her spine. I walked out of my office and down the corridor, passing the door of the medical room where Dr. Venturi worked under my jurisdiction now. Not Bernardello. I didn't stop. I kept moving toward the west wing. My wing. Our wing now. Whether Francesca liked the word or not. The last 2 nights had been contained. That was the only honest way to describe it. The first night I kept her in my bed longer than she expected. Not because I wanted comfort, but because I refused to let her leave that room feeling dismissed. The second night I didn't touch her at all, because she was wound too tight. And men who push women when they're wound tight create fractures instead of trust. Trust wasn't my goal. Survival was. But survival required her to stop starving herself out of spite. Required her to stop fighting her own body just to prove it was hers. And the problem was that the dynasty's pressure had made her body the only battlefield she could reliably reach. So she turned inward, a dangerous place to fight. I reached the dining room. She was there already, standing at the table with a cup of coffee in her hand like it was a weapon. Black clothes, hair pinned back, face calm, eyes burning. Julia stood near the window again, hovering like a disease that wore pearls. The moment Francesca saw me, her posture tightened. Not fear. Defiance. Good. Julia smiled faintly. Lazaro. I didn't look at her. Leave. Julia's smile held. It's breakfast. And you're unnecessary. I replied. Julia's eyes sharpened. You're making this messy. I'm making it mine. I corrected. Julia's gaze flicked to Francesca. Then back to me. She needs guidance. Francesca's mouth tightened. I need you to disappear. Julia's smile didn't falter, but her eyes flashed. Be careful. Francesca. Francesca didn't blink. Or what? Julia's voice dropped. Or you'll learn what happens to women who confuse defiance with power. That was the line. the one meant to humiliate without sounding like cruelty. Francesca's fingers tightened around her cup. I stepped closer, letting my presence cut across the space between them. "Julia," I said quietly. She turned her gaze to me, eyebrows lifting slightly, offended that I'd used her name without honorific. "Your advice is no longer required," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "The family will not appreciate, the family," I cut in, voice flat, "is not invited into my marriage." Julia's jaw tightened. She held my stare for a beat too long. Then she turned toward Francesca, smile sharpening again, as if she needed the last word. "You'll regret alienating everyone," she murmured. Francesca lifted her chin. "I'd rather be alone than owned." Julia's smile froze. Then she walked out. The room exhaled after she left. Francesca didn't look at me immediately. She stared at the door, jaw tight, as if she was forcing herself not to react. "You shouldn't provoke her," I said. Her gaze snapped to mine. "You shouldn't keep telling people what I should do." Her voice was steady. Her eyes were not. I moved closer to the table and sat across from her without asking. She watched me like she expected a command. I didn't give her one. I slid a plate toward her, simple food. Not a fertility ritual. Bread, eggs, fruit, coffee. She stared at it. "Is this a test?" "No," I replied. "It's breakfast." Her mouth tightened. "Everything in. This house is a test." I held her gaze. "Then pass this one by eating." She laughed once. Sharp. "You really think I'm going to take orders from you like?" I interrupted quietly. "Like what?" She swallowed. Her eyes narrowed. "Like say it." I told her. She didn't. Her pride refused. So I said it for her. "Like your property," I said. She went still. That word was a wound. I watched it land. Then I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not asking you to accept being property," I said. "I'm telling you the world is already treating you like it. Refusing to eat doesn't punish them. It punishes you." Her throat moved. For a second, something like exhaustion flickered in her eyes. Then she masked it. "You talk like you care," she said, voice sharp. I didn't soften. "I talk like I don't want you to collapse." Her gaze sharpened. "Because the heir might fail." I held her eyes. "Because you might." The silence that followed was dangerous. It was the kind of silence that makes truth too visible. She looked down at the plate, then back up. "You're changing," she said. I didn't answer. "Not yet," she continued, voice quieter. "The rules." "Yes," I said finally. Her brows snapped together. "Why?" I reached for my coffee and took a sip, buying myself 1 second to choose the most honest answer I could without giving her something she wasn't ready to hold. "Because the Bernardellos keep reaching," I said, "and I'm done letting them." Her mouth tightened. "So you're punishing them?" "Yes. And caging me more," she added. I set the cup down. "Also yes." Her eyes flared. "You admit it." I didn't blink. "I don't lie." She stared at me like she didn't know what to do with that. "Good. Truth destabilizes people who expect manipulation." She pushed the plate slightly away. "I don't want to eat." I leaned forward, voice low. "You don't want to give them the satisfaction of you being healthy enough to comply." Her eyes snapped to mine, furious. "Because I was right. You think you know me," she hissed. "I'm watching you," I replied. Her jaw clenched. "Of course you are." I didn't argue. I just stood. Then I walked around the table and stopped behind her chair. Her spine stiffened. My hand came to rest at the back of the chair, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the boundary of my presence. "Eat," I said quietly. She didn't move, so I leaned closer, voice in Italian, low and controlled. "Non fare la stupida," I murmured. "Don't be stupid." Her head turned sharply. "Don't speak to me like I'm a child." I didn't move away. "Then stop acting like starvation is rebellion." Her nostrils flared. She turned back to the plate, picked up the fork, and took a bite. Not obedient, defiant, as if she could make eating an act of war. I let her, because in this house, I wasn't interested in breaking her. I was interested in keeping her alive long enough to outlast the dynasty's hunger. Raphael appeared in the doorway. He didn't speak at first. He looked at Francesca, then at me. Then he said quietly, "Signore, the Bernardello liaison is still at the gate." Francesca's grip tightened on her fork. "Liaison." I looked at Raphael. "Remove him." Raphael nodded. "He's requesting to see the Signora." Francesca went still. I watched her face harden. The humiliation in her eyes was quick. But I saw it. Because even now, even married, even wearing my ring, men still believed they could request access to her like she was a file. No, I said. Raphael hesitated. He's insisting it's time-sensitive. I stood and walked toward the doorway, voice flat, then let him insist into the street. Raphael moved aside. Francesca's voice cut in behind me. You're going to tell him no because you care about me. I stopped, turned. Her eyes were bright and cold. Her mouth was tight with anger. I walked back to the table slowly. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. I stopped in front of her and leaned down until my face was close enough for her to feel the threat in my quiet. I'm telling him no, I said, because he doesn't have the right to look at you. Her breath hitched. She whispered, so you do see me as property. I held her gaze. I see you as mine. Her eyes flashed. That's the same thing. It isn't, I said. She scoffed softly. Explain. I won't, I replied. You'll learn. Her jaw clenched. That's convenient. Yes, I said. The honesty made her furious. Good. Let her be furious at me, not at herself. Raphael spoke again, cautious. Signore, the liaison says he has authority from the patriarch. He says the family expects. I turned my head slightly. Expectations die at my gate. Raphael nodded and left. Francesca stared at me. You're going to start a war. There's already a war, I replied. You just haven't wanted to name it. Her lips parted, then closed. She looked away as if she didn't trust herself to speak. Then she said, quiet. They're going to punish me. I watched her. Not the anger. The fear underneath it. They'll try, I said. And you'll punish them, she added. Yes, I replied. She laughed once. Bitter. You sound like you're enjoying this. I didn't blink. I enjoy control. Her gaze snapped back to mine. And me. The question was a blade thrown at my throat. I could have dodged. I didn't. I leaned closer. I enjoy that you don't submit, I said quietly. Her breath caught. I continued, voice low. I enjoy that you look at me like you hate me and still refuse to break. Her throat moved. She swallowed hard. And what? She whispered. Do you do when you enjoy something? My jaw flexed. The truth wanted to rise. I kept it contained. I removed threats. I said. Her eyes narrowed. That's not an answer. It's the only one you get today, I replied. She stared at me, then looked down at her plate again as if she needed the normalcy of food to keep her from being swallowed by the dangerous intimacy of the conversation. I left her to it and went to my office. Because control isn't only spoken, it's built. And if the dynasty was going to keep reaching, I needed to tighten the perimeter before they touched something they couldn't undo. By midday, the rule changes were visible. Not announced. Visible. No Bernardello staff in my house. No Bernardello doctor in my wing. No private calls to Francesca without my permission. And most importantly, no one moved in my household without Raphael's approval. That alone would make the Bernardellos furious. Good. Let them be furious outside my gates. In the afternoon, Dr. Venturi arrived at my request, not theirs. He entered my office with a careful expression, bag in hand like a man approaching a volatile animal. Signor Toscano, he began. Sit, I said. He sat. Raphael stood near the door, silent. Venturi cleared his throat. The family has called twice. They demand. They can demand into the void. I said. Venturi swallowed. They also want reports. No reports, I replied. His brows lifted slightly. Signore, timing matters. I stared at him. Then you give me a timeline. Not them. Venturi hesitated. And the Signora. She will not be treated like a schedule, I said. Venturi's eyes flicked to the file in his hand. Her health requires, I said. I repeated. Quiet. No reports. Venturi nodded quickly. Understood. I leaned back slightly. Her stress levels matter. I said. If the family pressures her, the body reacts. Venturi looked uncomfortable. Stress can affect conception. Yes, I said. His eyes flicked up. So you want? I want her protected from humiliation, I said. And I want my house free of their hands. Venturi nodded again. Then I added, voice colder. If you speak to them without my permission, you will be replaced. Venturi went pale. Yes, Signore. Good. Control restored. When Venturi left, Raphael stepped forward. Signore, we have confirmation. I looked at him. Of what? The Bernadello liaison contacted a journalist. Raphael said, he's trying to seed a narrative. The new bride is being kept isolated. Of course, if they couldn't access her physically, they would poison the public. That's faster than I expected. I said. Raphael's eyes narrowed. They're moving early. I nodded once. Then we move earlier. I stood and headed toward the west wing. Francesca was in the library when I found her, standing by the shelves, pulling books out like she was looking for something sharp enough to cut through silence. She turned when she heard me. Her eyes were cold. They tried to call me. I didn't pretend surprise. Yes. How did you know? She demanded. I blocked it. I said. Her jaw clenched. You blocked my phone. Yes. She stepped closer, anger flashing. You don't get to decide who I speak to. I held her gaze. In my house. I do. Her breath hitched. There it is. I didn't move. There it is. She laughed, sharp and furious. So I'm not a wife. I'm a hostage. I took one step closer, voice low. You're a target. She shook her head hard. Stop saying that like it makes this noble. It makes it accurate. I replied. Her eyes narrowed. And what about what I want? I watched her. What do you want? Her voice went quieter, more dangerous. I want one thing in this house to be mine. I didn't answer immediately, because I understood what she meant. Privacy. Choice. A corner of her life not scheduled by men. She lifted her chin. Is that unreasonable? No. I said. The word startled her. Her eyes flicked. Recalibrating. I stepped closer. Voice calm. But you're asking for it in a war. Her throat moved. So what do I get? I reached into my pocket and took out a phone. Not her old phone. A new one. I placed it on the table beside her. Her eyes narrowed. What is that? A line. I said. To me. To Raphael. To Venturi. No one else. Her gaze sharpened. So you still control it? Yes. I replied. But you have a voice you can use without their ears on it. Her breath hitched. She stared at the phone as if it might bite. Then she looked up at me. Eyes burning. This isn't freedom. No. I said. It's leverage. Her mouth tightened. I stepped closer until she had to look up at me. Francesca. I said quietly. Your family will keep reaching until they feel you slip. Her eyes narrowed. And you want me to be stable. I want you to be alive. I corrected. She stared at me. Then her voice dropped. Sharp. Why do you keep saying that like you mean it? I didn't blink. Because I do. The silence that followed was heavy. She looked away first. Then she whispered, almost angry at herself. You're making this worse. Yes. I said. Her head snapped back. What? I stepped closer. And this time I let my hands settle at her waist, firm. Territorial. She went still. I didn't pretend it was gentle. I didn't pretend it was romantic. This marriage was supposed to be strategy. I said. Clean. Efficient. Her breath hitched. I leaned in, voice lower. You complicate it. Her eyes flashed. I didn't ask to. I know. I said. She swallowed hard. So stop. I held her gaze. I can't. The honesty landed like a blow. She didn't move. Neither did I. The air tightened between us, too close, too charged, too full of things neither of us wanted to name yet. Her voice came quieter. Are you doing this because you want an heir? I didn't soften. Yes. And also because you want, she hesitated. Then her eyes lifted. Daring. Me. The question was a knife. I could have stepped back. I didn't. I leaned closer. Voice in Italian. Low and controlled. Say Mia. I murmured. You are mine. Her breath stopped. Her eyes went wide, not fear. Not softness. Recognition. Horror. Because she felt it too, the shift. The moment the contract stopped being only a contract. She whispered, shaking with control. Don't say that. I didn't. I did something worse. I held her gaze and let the truth settle without comforting it. Then I released her waist and stepped back. Not because I was done, because if I stayed too close, I would take more than I should, and she would hate herself for giving it. I didn't want her hatred. Not because I needed love, because I needed her steady. She stared at me, chest rising too fast. You're changing, she said again, voice thin. Yes, I answered. Her eyes sharpened. Into what? I held her gaze and gave her the only answer that mattered. Into the man who won't let them touch you. I said. Her throat tightened. Then she whispered, barely audible, "That's not a good thing." I stepped closer one last time, close enough that only she could hear my voice. "It's the only thing," I said, "that keeps you from being theirs." Her eyes flickered, anger and fear braided tight. I turned and walked out before the moment could become something we couldn't control. Because tonight, the dynasty would escalate again. And when they did, they would learn the new rule. Not the old one where Francesca belonged to the Bernardellos. The new one, the one I had already decided. And by the time they understood it, it would be too late. I stopped at the doorway and looked back at her. She stood frozen beside the table, the secure phone still untouched. Her face hard, her eyes too bright. I said the line calmly, like a verdict. "You stopped belonging to them." I told her, "the day you became my wife."
Chapter 7. Francesca. The first sign something was wrong was the taste. Not bitter. My coffee was always bitter in this house because nothing here was meant to comfort. Not sweet. There was no sweet in Lazzaro Toscano's world unless it was bait. This was metallic, like I'd bitten my tongue and the blood was hiding. I stood at the kitchen counter with the mug between my hands and stared at the surface of the coffee as if it had shifted shape while I wasn't looking. The steam curled up in slow, lazy spirals, beautiful in a way that made my stomach turn because nothing beautiful in my life was safe anymore. I took another sip to be sure. Metal again. My throat tightened. A small, irrational thought flashed. It's in the cup. I set the mug down hard enough that the ceramic clinked against stone. My pulse kicked in my throat. I pressed my palm to my stomach instinctively, a reflex I hadn't earned yet, but the house had trained my body to anticipate the future like it was already a threat. A staff woman stood 2 steps away, hands clasped, face neutral, watching, reporting. "Change the coffee," I said, voice steady. She blinked once. "Signora?" "Change it," I repeated. Her eyes flicked, not to me, to the camera in the corner. I saw it, the tiny lens embedded in molding, always watching. The staff woman swallowed. "It's from the same pot, Signora." I stared at her, then changed the pot. Her posture stiffened, but she moved fast, quiet, trained. As she poured out the coffee, a sudden wave rolled through me. Not nausea exactly, something sharper. My vision narrowed for a second, as if the room had leaned sideways. My skin went cold, then too hot. I gripped the counter. "Breathe. Don't give them your pulse." A voice echoed in my head, not my own. Lazzaro's. Control is survival. I forced air into my lungs. The dizziness eased, but not fully. The staff woman returned with a fresh cup and held it out to me with both hands like she was offering a peace treaty. I didn't take it. "What did you put in it?" I asked. Her eyes widened, offended. "Nothing, Signora." I watched her face. Fear didn't spike. Guilt didn't show. But in a house built on secrecy, innocence could be trained too. "I want water," I said. She nodded too fast. "Of course." She turned to the filtered dispenser built into the wall. "Bottled," I corrected. She froze. I waited. She turned slowly and nodded again, smaller this time. "Yes, Signora." My hand stayed tight on the counter. A guard appeared in the doorway, silent, present. His gaze swept me, then the staff woman, then the cup. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The bottle arrived sealed. I took it, twisted the cap myself, and drank slowly. The water tasted like nothing. Relief didn't come, because relief would mean I believed it was over, and my body was still buzzing like a warning. "Tell Raffaele I want a sweep," I said to the guard. His eyes sharpened. "Yes, Signora." He didn't ask why. That was the first real difference in this house compared to my grandfather's. In Bernardello territory, a woman demanding anything was met with correction. Here, my words moved men. Not because I was respected, because I was claimed. I hated that I noticed the distinction. I hated more that part of me relied on it. I turned away from the counter and started for the hallway. And the dizziness hit again, harder. A wave that snapped my knees weak, made my stomach roll, made my breath stutter. I grabbed the wall, fingers scraping plaster. The guard stepped forward instantly. "Signora, I'm fine," I snapped. The lie tasted like metal, too. My vision spotted. For half a second, panic flashed. Pure, raw. If I pass out, they can touch me. In this world, unconscious meant accessible. Accessible meant taken. I forced myself upright. "Get Venturi," I said. The guard didn't move. His eyes flicked down the hall, like he was deciding whether to disobey my words to obey Lazzaro's expectations. Then he spoke into his earpiece, voice tight. "Raffaele, now!" I didn't like that he didn't say Venturi, but my body didn't care about pride right now. My body cared about staying vertical. I walked anyway. Slow, measured steps, as if moving carefully could disguise the fact that something inside me was wrong. By the time I reached the sitting room, my hands were trembling. I curled them into fists and tucked them against my thighs, refusing to let the cameras have that satisfaction. I had just sat down when Raffaele arrived. He entered like a knife, quiet, fast, eyes scanning. He didn't greet me like a friend. He assessed me like a threat had already been confirmed. "Signora," he said, voice low. "What happened?" "I drank coffee," I said flatly. "It tasted wrong. Now I'm dizzy." Raffaele's jaw tightened. He turned his head sharply and spoke into his earpiece. "Lock the kitchen. Nobody enters. Nobody leaves." My stomach tightened. "Raffaele." He looked at me, gaze steady. "Breathe, Signora." The words were calm. The tone was not. He'd already decided something was wrong. He'd already decided the house was under attack. I hated that I felt a flicker of relief. Someone believed me. Someone took my body seriously. Not as a vessel, as a target. Footsteps thundered in the hall. Not running. Lazzaro didn't run. But his speed had weight, purpose. Violence held tight under control. He entered the room and the air changed. The guards outside straightened. The house itself seemed to tighten around him. His gaze hit me first, not the room, me. He crossed the space in 3 steps and stopped in front of me, eyes scanning my face like he was looking for bruises. "What?" he said. One word. Deadly calm. "I'm dizzy," I answered. His jaw flexed. "From what?" "Coffee," I said. His gaze flicked to Raffaele. Raffaele spoke immediately. "Kitchen locked. Sweep started. Staff contained." Lazzaro's eyes didn't soften. They went colder. He crouched in front of me, sudden, controlled, and tilted my chin up with 2 fingers. The gesture that used to feel like ownership. Right now it felt like assessment. "Look at me," he ordered. I did. The room swayed slightly. I swallowed hard. His thumb brushed once along my jawline, not tender, checking temperature. "You're pale," he said. "I'm fine," I snapped. His eyes narrowed. "No." The word was final. He stood abruptly and spoke into his phone without looking away from me. "Venturi," he said. "Now." Then he looked at Raffaele. "Bring everyone who handled her food in the last 24 hours. Raffaele nodded once. "Yes, signore." I forced my voice steady. "Don't do this." Lazzaro's gaze snapped back to me. "Do what?" "Turn the house into a prison," I said. His mouth didn't move. "It already is." The honesty hit like a slap. Then he added, quieter, "The difference is whether it's a prison that protects you or one that delivers you." My throat tightened. I hated that the sentence steadied me. Venturi arrived minutes later with his bag, face drawn. He didn't greet me. He didn't congratulate me. He moved like a man walking into a volatile animal's den. "Signor Toscano," he began. "Check her," Lazzaro said. Venturi nodded and approached me carefully, as if he understood I wasn't fragile, but my pride was sharp. "Signora," he said softly, "tell me what you feel." "Dizzy," I said. "Metal taste, heat, it comes in waves." Venturi's brow furrowed. He checked my pulse with 2 fingers, then my pupils with a light. His hands were professional, but still. A man touching me medically in this house carried a different weight. I held still because I refused to look afraid. Venturi's mouth tightened. "This could be stress," he said cautiously. Lazzaro's voice cut in, lethal. "No." Venturi swallowed. "It could also be contamination." The room went colder. I felt Lazzaro's presence tighten, like every muscle in him had gone into war. "From what?" he asked. Venturi hesitated. "Caffeine can be used to mask certain substances. A mild sedative, a blood pressure drop, something to make her faint." My stomach rolled, because fainting wasn't just fainting here. It was access. Venturi continued, choosing his words carefully. "If someone wanted to," he glanced at Lazzaro, then back to me, "to make her vulnerable without leaving obvious marks, this would be one method." I swallowed hard. "So they tried to drug me." Venturi didn't deny it. "Possibly." Lazzaro's voice went dangerously quiet. "Possibly." Raffaele stepped in. "We pulled the coffee pot and grounds. We'll run testing." Lazzaro didn't look at him. "Bring the staff." The staff arrived in a line. Kitchen hands, the morning attendant. 2 people I'd barely seen before. They stood with their eyes down, trembling. Not because they cared about me, because they were afraid of Lazzaro. Good. Fear makes people honest faster than manners. Lazzaro stood in front of them, a wall of controlled violence. "Who handled her cup?" he asked. Silence. Cook's lips trembled. "We all—" "Signore, we." "Who?" he repeated. The staff woman from earlier stepped forward, voice shaking. "I served it." Lazzaro's gaze pinned her. Did you make it? No, Signore. Who did? He asked. Her eyes darted to a young man near the back, new, nervous. He swallowed hard. I brewed it, Signore. Lazzaro took one slow step toward him. The man's knees nearly buckled. I didn't put anything in it, he blurted. I swear. Shut up, Lazzaro said quietly. The man went silent instantly. Lazzaro looked at Raffaele. Names. Raffaele spoke from his tablet. Marco DeSantis, hired 3 weeks ago through an agency. References clean. No known connections. Lazzaro's eyes stayed on Marco. Who paid for your agency? Marco shook his head fast. I don't know. Lazzaro didn't raise his voice. You will tell me the truth. Marco's breathing turned ragged. Venturi stepped closer to me again, voice lower. Signora, sit back, breathe slowly. I obeyed without wanting to, because my vision was starting to blur again at the edges, and I refused to give them the satisfaction of me falling. Lazzaro spoke to Raffaele without looking away from Marco. Take him. Marco's eyes went wide. No, please, I didn't. 2 guards seized him, his feet dragged on the marble. Lazzaro's voice stayed calm as death. Find out who touched him. Raffaele nodded. Yes, Signore. The rest of the staff stood frozen. Lazzaro turned to them, voice cold. If any of you helped, he said, you die. A sob slipped from someone's throat. Good. Let them understand the stakes. He looked at the staff woman who had served me. You, he said. She flinched. You will be relocated, he said. Not punished, unless you lied. Her eyes widened with relief. I didn't, Signore. We'll see, he replied. Then he turned back to me. His eyes dropped to my face again, assessing, hunting for weakness. I hated that my throat tightened at the attention, because I was afraid, and because the only person in the room who could stop this was the man who also controlled my life. You need to lie down, Venturi said quietly. I'm fine, I said again, stubborn. Lazzaro's gaze cut to him. Will she faint? Venturi hesitated. Possibly. Lazzaro's jaw clenched. Then, without warning, he scooped me up. One clean movement, strong arms under my knees and back, lifting me off the chair like I weighed nothing. My breath punched out of me. Put me down, I snapped, grabbing his shoulder. He didn't. His voice was low, Italian threaded through it like a command. Stai zitta. Be quiet. Not cruel. Controlled. And somehow that made it worse. Because the house watched. The guards watched. The cameras watched. And my husband carried me like a possession being removed from danger. I hated the humiliation. I hated the safety. I hated that my body relaxed a fraction in his hold, as if it recognized the only stable thing in this house was his control. He carried me down the hall into the west wing, into the bedroom, and set me on the bed carefully, too carefully for a man who claimed he wasn't soft. He didn't climb in. He didn't hover. He stood over me like a wall. Venturi followed, closing the door behind him. I need a sample, Venturi said quietly. Blood pressure, pulse, maybe a quick draw. Lazzaro's gaze went cold. Do it. Venturi moved efficiently, hands careful. He checked my pressure, my pulse, drew a small vial. I stared at the ceiling and forced my breathing slow. The room still spun slightly. My stomach rolled. I swallowed hard. When Venturi finished, he stepped back. I'll run it immediately. Lazzaro nodded once. Do not speak to anyone. Venturi swallowed. Yes, Signore. He left. The door clicked shut. Silence. Just me on the bed, my heart still racing, and Lazzaro standing there like a man holding his rage in his teeth. I pushed myself up slightly. Someone tried to drug me, I said. His gaze locked onto mine. Yes. My voice shook with fury. In your house. His jaw flexed. Yes. I swallowed hard. So your control failed. For the first time, something cracked in his expression. Not softness. Rage. At himself. At them. At the fact that my body had been touched through a cup. Once, he said quietly. The single word carried a promise. It would not happen again. I stared at him. Who? His eyes went colder. The dynasty. A rival. A traitor. It doesn't matter yet. It matters to me, I snapped. He stepped closer to the bed, voice low. What matters is this, he said. They wanted you weak. My throat tightened. They wanted me accessible. His gaze sharpened. Yes. I swallowed hard. And you... His hand came down to the edge of the mattress, close to my thigh, not touching, anchoring himself. And I will make them regret it. The intensity in his voice made my skin prickle. Fear and something else. I hated the something else. I lifted my chin. I'm not your excuse to start a war. He leaned closer, eyes flat. You are the reason the war is personal. My breath caught. That was the most terrifying thing he could have admitted. Because the moment man like Lazaro makes something personal, he stops negotiating, he stops calculating. He becomes a weapon aimed at whoever touched his claim. I whispered, almost against my will, I don't want to be a claim. His eyes held mine. Too late. The words were not romantic. They were a verdict. I lay back, breathing slow, the dizziness easing but the humiliation burning, because my body was not mine in the way I wanted it to be. Not in the Bernardello Empire, not in the Toscano house. And yet, when Lazaro stood guard over my bed like a man who would burn the world down before letting anyone touch me again, part of me felt safer than I had felt in years. That part of me was dangerous. I turned my face away, angry at myself. Outside the bedroom, the house erupted into controlled chaos. Boots in halls, doors opening and closing, voices low and sharp, an investigation, a lockdown, a war. Hours passed like that. I drifted in and out of restless half-sleep. Every time I opened my eyes, Lazaro was still there, not sitting, standing, moving, speaking quietly into his phone in Italian, issuing orders with lethal calm. At some point, Raffaele entered, face hard. "Signore," he said. Lazaro turned. "Speak." "We found a secondary tin of grounds," Raffaele said. "Not from our supplier, it was placed behind the pantry shelving." Lazaro's gaze went colder. "So it was deliberate?" Raffaele nodded once. "Yes." "And Marco?" Lazaro asked. Raffaele's jaw tightened. "He's talking." Lazaro didn't look at me when he asked the next question, but I felt it anyway. "Who?" Raffaele hesitated. "He says he was paid by an intermediary. Cash. A phone number. He thought it was just a test to see if the household security noticed." My stomach turned. A test. They treated my body like a training exercise. Lazaro's voice went quiet. "Find the intermediary." Raffaele nodded. "Already moving." Lazaro's gaze lifted toward the hall beyond the bedroom door. "Bring everyone into the main room." Raffaele blinked. "Everyone?" "Yes," Lazaro said. Raffaele nodded and left. I pushed myself up. "What are you doing?" Lazaro looked at me, expression unreadable. "Ending comfort." My throat tightened. That doesn't answer. He stepped closer to the bed. His hand came down briefly, one firm touch at my shoulder, steadying me. "You will stay here," he said. "I want to see," I snapped. His eyes narrowed. "No." The refusal was hard. I hated it. Then he lowered his voice. Italian threaded through it like steel. "Per favore." Please. The word shocked me because it wasn't a command. It was restraint. A man like him didn't say please unless he was trying not to become something worse. I swallowed hard. "Fine," I whispered. He held my gaze for a beat, then turned and walked out of the room. The door stayed open, as if he wanted me to hear, as if he wanted everyone to hear. I slid off the bed and moved to the doorway anyway. Quiet, careful, standing just inside the shadow so I could watch without being in the center. The main hall below had filled with staff, kitchen workers, housekeepers, guards, even Julia, standing at the edge, pearl earrings gleaming like she was pretending this was beneath her. Raffaele stood near Lazaro, like a shadow with teeth. Lazaro faced them all. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He stood still, and the stillness was worse than screaming. "My wife was drugged in my house," he said. A gasp rippled through the staff. Julia's eyes narrowed sharply. Lazaro continued, voice calm. "Someone thought they could touch what is mine." The word mine landed like a gunshot. I flinched. Not because I didn't know he thought it, because hearing it publicly made it real in a way I wasn't prepared to accept. He let his gaze sweep the room. "Understand this," he said. "If you helped, you will not survive the day." Silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Lazaro's voice lowered, even colder. "And if anyone outside this house believes they can reach her again through food, through medicine, through paperwork, through doctors, then they are declaring war on me." His gaze flicked up toward the doorway where I stood, hidden but visible enough. For half a second, his eyes softened, not in romance, in certainty. Then his gaze returned to the staff. "I will say it once," he said, "and you will repeat it to anyone who asks." The hall went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Lazaro's voice was a verdict. "Anyone who threatens my wife," he said, "dies." The words slammed into the house like a lock turning. A promise, a hook, and as the staff stood frozen under it, I realized the war had changed shape. It wasn't just about an heir anymore, it was about me. And Lazaro Toscano had just made that personal in front of witnesses.
Chapter 8. Lazaro She Tried to Leave. Not dramatically. No slammed doors. No shouted threats. Francesca didn't waste emotion on performances. She moved the way she always moved when she felt cornered, quiet, precise, controlled enough to look calm from a distance. That was how I caught her. Barefoot in the West Hall at dawn, hair still loose from sleep, a small bag in her hand like she'd packed only what she could carry if she had to run. She didn't look at the guards. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked straight ahead like the house was a maze and she'd finally found a route. Raphael stood at the end of the corridor, blocking the exit like a fact. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He just existed. Francesca stopped 2 steps from him and lifted her chin. "Move," she said. Raphael's gaze flicked past her, toward me. I was behind her. She hadn't heard me approach. No one ever did when I didn't want them to. "Francesca," I said. She went still, the way a woman goes still when she's trying to keep rage from showing. Then she turned slowly, eyes bright and cold. "Good morning," she said. It wasn't polite. It was a knife. I looked at the bag in her hand. "Put it down." Her jaw flexed. No, the refusal wasn't fragile. It wasn't emotional. It was a decision. "I'm leaving," she added, voice flat, as if stating whether. "You're not," I replied. Her eyes flashed. "You don't get to decide that." "I do," I said. She laughed once. Sharp. "There it is." Her fingers tightened around the bag's handle. "You're going to lock me in again?" "Yes," I answered. Her nostrils flared. "Because you're afraid." The word hit in a place I didn't like. I stepped closer until the air between us tightened. "I'm not afraid," I said. She lifted her chin higher. "Then why are your men standing in my hallway?" "Because someone tried to drug you," I replied. Her eyes hardened. "And you responded by making my life smaller." I didn't soften. I responded by making your life longer. Silence snapped tight. Raphael stayed still at the end of the hall. The guards pretended to be invisible, but they listened. The house listened. Francesca's voice went quieter, more dangerous. "You promised me one thing," she said. I held her gaze. "Name it." "You promised no one would touch me," she whispered. "And no one will," I said. She nodded once, the motion sharp. "Then let me leave." I stared at her. This was not logic. This was rage trying to become escape. Escape was the oldest instinct in her body now. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You leave this house," I said, "and they will reach you again." Her mouth twisted. "They already reached me in your house." My jaw tightened. That was the truth that kept circling like a blade. My walls had been penetrated. My control had been tested, and she had felt it in her blood. I didn't deny it. "Once." She spat the word back at me. "Once is enough." Her eyes went wet bright, not tears, not softness. Fury contained so tightly it turned her gaze sharp. "You don't get to turn me into a project," she said. "You don't get to treat me like a problem you can solve by tightening the leash." I took another step. She didn't back away. That was her curse and her strength. She didn't retreat. She held ground even when ground was a cliff. "I'm not solving you," I said. "I'm securing you." Her laugh was bitter. "That's the same thing." "It isn't," I replied. Her voice rose, just a fraction. "It is when I can't breathe without your permission." The sentence hit harder than her insults. Because it wasn't rhetoric. It was how it felt for her. I looked at her face, pale, proud, furious, and saw the exhaustion beneath it. The part of her that had been holding herself upright with discipline was fraying. And fraying makes women do reckless things. Like run barefoot into a world full of men who would call it protective custody when they dragged her back. "Come inside," I said. She tightened her grip on the bag. No, I didn't reach for the bag. I reached for her chin, 2 fingers under it, tilting her face up. That gesture had become a language between us. Command. Claim. Attention. Her breath caught. Not because she liked it. Because her body couldn't decide what it meant anymore. "Listen to me," I said in Italian. "Ascoltami." Her eyes burned. "Don't." I didn't release her. "Your family is escalating," I said quietly. "They will not stop at coffee. They'll use doctors. Papers. They'll call you unstable. They'll say you're being held under duress." Her jaw clenched. "And you'll prove them right." I held her gaze. "No," she laughed again. Sharper. "You already did. You carried me like a possession. You locked me behind doors. You threatened everyone who breathes near me." "Yes," I said. Her eyes widened, offended by the lack of denial. Then she whispered, shaking with control, "You're enjoying it. That accusation could have been ignored. I didn't ignore it. I leaned closer. I enjoy that you're alive. Her throat moved. That's not what I said. I lowered my voice. I enjoy control. I said, I don't enjoy you being harmed. Her eyes narrowed. You don't get to separate those. I released her chin. Not because I was finished. Because I needed to choose restraint before it chose violence for me. Put the bag down. I said. She didn't. So I stepped around her. Not blocking her path, removing it. I nodded to Raphael. He moved immediately, taking the bag gently from her grip without touching her. Francesca's breath punched out of her. Don't you dare. She snapped. Raphael's face remained blank. He carried the bag away like it was evidence. Francesca's eyes snapped back to me, pure fury now. You did that in front of them. She hissed. I didn't flinch. Yes. You humiliated me, she said. I stopped you. I corrected. She took a step toward me, close enough that her breath hit my throat. You think I'm trying to run because I'm weak? She whispered. I'm trying to run because I'm suffocating. The words hit. Not my ego. My control. Because suffocation was a vulnerability I couldn't eliminate with locks. I watched her face, the tension in her jaw, the fire in her eyes, and I understood the dangerous truth. She wasn't trying to escape the dynasty anymore. She was trying to escape me. I stepped closer until we were almost touching. You're suffocating, I said quietly, because your pride keeps fighting the reality that you're a target. Her eyes flashed. Stop calling me that. Then stop acting like the world will spare you because you want autonomy. I replied. Her hand lifted, palm on my chest, hard. Not a caress. A shove. I let it push me back half a step. Not because it moved me, because she needed to feel she could. Her eyes flicked at the allowance. Good. You talk like you're protecting me, she said, voice shaking. But you're not protecting me. You're owning me. I held her gaze. Yes. The word detonated the air. Her eyes widened. Then her mouth twisted into a bitter smile. Finally, she stepped back, hands curling into fists. So say it, she whispered. Say what you actually believe. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften. I said it like a verdict. You are my wife. I said, and no one gets access to you without going through me. Her breath hitched. She stared at me like she wanted to hate me cleanly. But the hate wouldn't settle because beneath it was something worse, recognition. This was the truth of the marriage. Not romance. Not partnership. A transfer of control. She whispered, Raw, you're not a savior. You're a different cage. I nodded once. Yes. Her eyes flashed with sudden, vicious bravery. Then why do I feel safer with you than with them? The question cracked the air open. Because it wasn't an accusation. It was her own horror. I watched her swallow it. Watched her hate herself for admitting it. I stepped closer. Because I'm competent. I said. Her laugh was broken. That's your answer. It's the only one that matters in war. I replied. She shook her head hard, hair slipping loose. I hate you. I didn't move. No. I said quietly. You hate that you react when I touch you. Her eyes froze. Her breath stopped. The hallway went silent. Even the guards felt it, the shift. Francesca's jaw clenched so hard I thought she might crack a tooth. Don't, she whispered. I leaned in, voice low. Tell me I'm wrong. She couldn't, not without lying, and she was too proud for lies that made her smaller. Her throat bobbed. Her eyes flashed with humiliation. I didn't let her retreat into it. Come back inside. I said. She didn't move. So I turned slightly and spoke to Raphael without looking away from her. Clear the west wing. I said. No one near my door. Raphael nodded once and left, barking quiet orders into his earpiece. Francesca's eyes narrowed. So now you isolate me further. I stepped closer until my shadow covered her feet. No, I said. Now I isolate us. Her breath caught. The statement landed like a match. Because it wasn't about protection. It was about choosing a perimeter and putting her inside it with me. She whispered. Why? I looked at her mouth. Then her eyes. Because you're about to break. I said quietly. And I don't want witnesses. Her eyes widened. Furious. I'm not going to break. You already are. I said. You're just doing it with your teeth clenched. Her chest rose fast. I hate you. I know. I said again. Then I reached for her, not the bag. Not her wrist, her waist. My hand settled there. Firm. Not gentle. Grounding. She went rigid. Her breath hitched like her body had been waiting for this. hating it, needing it. Move, she said, voice shaking. I didn't. I leaned closer and spoke into the space near her mouth. Italian threading through it like a private warning. Non sparire, I murmured. Don't disappear. Her eyes flared. And then she hit me. Not with her fist. With her mouth. She surged forward and kissed me like violence. Like accusation. Like surrender disguised as attack. Her hands fisted in my shirt. Nails biting fabric. Dragging me closer as if she could punish herself by punishing me. The kiss wasn't tender. It wasn't sweet. It was an explosion of everything she refused to say. I'm scared. I'm trapped. I hate that you feel safe. I didn't take more than she gave. I didn't deepen it until she did, until her breath broke and she pulled me in, anger trembling through her. I broke the kiss only long enough to breathe. You're angry, I murmured. Yes, she whispered, breath shaking. Stay angry. I said, don't disappear. Her fingers tightened in my shirt. I kissed her again, deeper this time, and felt her body react, breath hitching, spine tightening, then loosening by degrees as her pride fought her hunger and lost ground inch by inch. Her nails scraped lightly at my collar, warning and claim both. I moved her backward, guiding, not dragging, toward the bedroom door. She didn't resist. That was the terrifying part. She followed, not because she'd softened, because the anger had tipped into need and she couldn't deny it anymore. The West Wing was quiet, cleared. No staff, no footsteps, no voices. Only the sound of our breathing and the soft scrape of her heel against marble as she stumbled once. Then corrected, refusing to look weak. I opened the bedroom door without taking my mouth off hers for more than a second. She made a small, frustrated sound when I pulled away. I didn't apologize. I pulled her inside and shut the door. The click was a sentence. Her breath hitched at the sound. I pressed her back against the door, my body blocking hers, my hand at her waist holding her steady. She shoved at my shoulders, once. Not to stop me, to test me. I let her push. I stepped back half a pace. Her eyes widened at the space. Say no, I murmured. If you mean it. Her chest rose fast. Her eyes burned. She didn't say no. She whispered my name like it was a curse and a confession. Lazaro. The sound of it hit me low. Dangerous. I stepped forward again, closing the space she'd tested. My hand slid to the back of her neck, firm, anchoring, and I kissed her again, slow enough to make her feel every second. Her hands went into my hair, fingers gripping, pulling just enough to hurt. I let her mark the moment as hers too. Her breath broke on a sound she tried to swallow. I kept my mouth at her jaw, voice low. Don't fight your body just because you hate the reason it wants. I hate you, she whispered again, but her hips shifted closer like her body was calling her a liar. I smiled without humor against her skin. I know. I lifted her, not a romantic carry. Not gentle fantasy, one clean movement. Repositioning her toward the bed like war. She made a small sound of protest. Then she clutched my shoulders like she didn't want to fall. I set her down on the edge of the mattress carefully. Too carefully. Because if I didn't, this would become something else. Something uncontrolled. And uncontrolled was where I stopped being the man who protected her and became the man who consumed her. I knelt in front of her, keeping my hands at her sides, grounding her. Not taking. Her eyes widened, surprised by the shift. What are you doing? She whispered, voice shaking. Keeping you here. I said, with me, not with them. Her throat moved as she swallowed. I kissed her again slow, deliberate, and felt her hands clutch my shoulders like she needed an anchor even while she hated needing anything. This wasn't tenderness. This was collision. Anger, fear, hunger, pride, everything in her that refused to kneel and everything in her that wanted to be held steady. I stayed in control. Not because I wanted obedience, because if I lost control, I would take too much, and she would hate herself for giving it. I wouldn't do that to her. Not tonight. My hands slid along her sides, over fabric and the edge of skin grounding. Her breathing turned fast and shallow, eyes glass bright with effort not to fall apart. Look at me, I said softly. She did, and in her gaze I saw the thing she never let anyone see. Fear of being reduced, fear of being used, fear of being discarded once the dynasty got what it wanted. I lowered my mouth to hers again and kissed her like a promise I wasn't allowed to speak out loud. Her body finally tipped, tension breaking. a tremor moving through her like a confession she didn't want to give. She made a small, broken sound, half anger, half relief. I held her through it, not letting her disappear, not letting her apologize, not letting her turn it into shame. When it ended, she stayed rigid for a beat, breath ragged, eyes wide as if she didn't recognize the woman who'd just reacted like that. I didn't give her space to spiral. I pulled her into me and held her with my face pressed into her hair, one arm around her waist, firm and steady, keeping her close like the world couldn't reach through my body. She stiffened. Then, slowly, like it cost her pride, she let her weight settle into my chest a fraction. A tiny surrender. Not to love, to safety. I spoke into her hair. Quiet. Italian threaded through it. Sei al sicuro. I murmured. You're safe. Her fingers stayed tight in my shirt. She didn't speak for a long time. Then her voice came hoarse. Small and furious, because that was the only way she knew how to be vulnerable. You can't fix this, she whispered. I didn't release her. No, I said, but I can stop them from breaking you. She let out a sharp breath that could have been a laugh or a sob. She chose neither. She stayed in my arms, rigid but not fleeing. That mattered, because the line had been crossed. The marriage wasn't just a contract anymore. It was a body reacting in my hands. A woman who hated me admitting, with her mouth, that she needed something only I could give her right now. And that was the most dangerous development yet. Because once a man like me realizes he can steady a woman like her, he stops pretending he'll ever let her go. Francesca pulled back, just enough to look at me. Eyes bright, jaw clenched, humiliation and fury braided tight. This doesn't mean I forgive you, she said. I held her gaze. Good. Her brows snapped together. Good. Yes, I said. Forgiveness makes people sloppy. She stared at me like she wanted to hit me again. Then she whispered, Raw, I don't want to need you. The sentence was the hook. The real one. Not my threats. Not the dynasty's pressure. Her fear of dependence. I looked at her face, the steel and the cracks, and answered with the only truth I had. Neither do I murmured, and the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the sound of two people realizing the war outside the door wasn't the only war anymore.
Chapter 9. Francesca knew before the doctor said the word. Not because I wanted to. Because in a house where my body was tracked like a shipment, you learn to feel the smallest shift like it's a siren. My breasts ached in a way that wasn't normal. My stomach turned at the scent of coffee. Coffee, the same thing that had tasted like metal the day someone tried to drug me. My sleep was wrong. Not deeper, not calmer, just heavier, like my body was pulling inward, as if it was protecting something even I wasn't allowed to name yet. And the worst part was that I'd started counting days without meaning to. Like the dynasty had installed a clock inside my ribs. I stood in the bathroom of the West Wing and stared at myself in the mirror. Same face, same sharp eyes, same mouth trained into neutrality. But my skin looked different, pale in a way that made me look vulnerable. I hated that. I pressed 2 fingers to my pulse point in my neck, checking myself like I could verify reality with pressure. Steady, fast, angry. A knock came at the door. Not the staff woman, not Julia, not anyone who pretended to be polite while holding a leash. Raffaele. I recognized the rhythm. 2 sharp taps, a pause, then one more. Control in a pattern. Signora, he called through the wood. Dr. Venturi requests you downstairs. Requests. In this house, that word meant already decided. I swallowed hard. Tell him I'm busy. Silence. Then careful. He says it's time-sensitive. My stomach tightened. Time-sensitive meant one thing in this story. Either the dynasty was moving or my body was. I exhaled slowly, forcing air into my lungs like it was a weapon. I'll come, I said. When I opened the door, the corridor was empty, except for the 2 guards stationed at the end like shadows. Raffaele stood by the wall, tablet in hand, expression controlled. His eyes flicked over me. Assessment, not judgment. You look pale, he said quietly. Thank you, I replied. He didn't smile. This way. The medical room smelled like antiseptic and quiet threat. Dr. Venturi stood near the counter with a file closed in front of him. Closed. Because Lazzaro had ripped the last one in half and thrown it away like an insult. Venturi looked up when I entered. His expression gave nothing away, but his hands did. They were too still. Doctors who are calm are dangerous. Doctors who are careful are worse. Signora Toscano, he said, thank you for coming. I didn't sit. What is this? Venturi hesitated. I'd like to run a confirmation test. The words hit my stomach like ice. Confirmation, I repeated. He nodded once, professional. Blood draw, fast turnaround. I stared at him. For what? He didn't answer immediately. He looked past me toward the door, and I felt it. Someone behind me, presence heavy enough to change the room. Lazaro. I didn't need to turn around to know. The air always tightened when he arrived. I turned anyway. He stood in the doorway in a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, no jacket, no tie. His hair was slightly disordered, like he'd been moving too fast to care about appearances. His face was calm. His eyes were not. They went straight to me, scanning. Color, posture, breathing. He didn't greet me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just said, sit. The command slid under my skin. I hated that my body responded faster than my pride. I sat. Venturi cleared his throat. Signora has reported symptoms consistent with early pregnancy. I cut in, voice sharp. I didn't report anything. Venturi's eyes flicked briefly to Lazaro, then back to me. Lazaro's voice stayed flat. You didn't have to, I noticed. My breath caught. Not because it was romantic. Because it meant he was watching me that closely. I forced my voice steady. So now I'm under surveillance by my husband, too. Lazaro's gaze didn't soften. Yes. The honesty made my jaw tighten. Venturi reached for gloves. If you consent, we'll draw blood and run the test immediately. Consent. That word felt like a joke in this house. I looked at Lazaro. If I refuse, Lazaro's jaw flexed. Then you refuse. The answer startled me. I blinked. That's it. That's it, he repeated. The air held between us. It would have been easier if he'd demanded, easier if he'd forced. Because then I could hate him cleanly. But he didn't. He just watched. And the watching felt like pressure anyway. I swallowed hard. My hand drifted to my stomach on instinct, protective and furious. Then I looked at Venturi. Do it. Venturi nodded once. Efficient. The needle prick was small. The significance was not. He filled a vial, labeled it, sealed it, and moved to the counter. His motions were fast, practiced. Lazaro didn't look at Venturi while he worked. He looked at me. Like if he watched hard enough, he could control the outcome. I hated that it made my chest tighten. I hated that I wanted the outcome to be something I could use. Because pregnancy wasn't a blessing here. It was a weapon. Venturi washed his hands and stepped away. Results in 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. Lazaro didn't sit. He stood near the wall, arms folded, posture controlled, a predator waiting. I sat with my back straight and forced my breathing even. We didn't speak, because speaking would have made it real too early. My mind tried to run ahead anyway, flash images I didn't want. My grandfather's face when he heard, Julia's smile, Vittoria's eyes scanning my stomach like she could claim it with a glance, the word broodmare echoing in a room full of men who laughed. I squeezed my hands together to keep them from shaking. Lazaro's voice cut through the silence. Look at me. I snapped my gaze up, offended. His eyes held mine, dark, steady. Breathe, he said quietly, my jaw clenched. Stop commanding my lungs. His mouth didn't move. Then stop letting your fear run them. The sentence hit like a slap because it was true. I inhaled slowly. Exhaled, my pulse eased, barely. Venturi returned too soon and too late at the same time. He held a printed result in his hand, expression professional, but his eyes carried weight. I hated him for it. He looked at me. Signora. Lazaro's voice cut in. Speak. Venturi swallowed. Positive. The word landed in my body like a gunshot. Positive. Pregnant. A wave rolled through me. Heat, cold, nausea, disbelief, power. My throat tightened. My eyes stung. Not tears, not softness. Just the brutal pressure of reality pressing down. I didn't move. If I moved, I would fall apart. Venturi continued, voice careful. Early, likely within the last week. My mind flashed to Lazaro's bedroom, his hand at my waist. The way he held me afterward, face in my hair, saying "Say el securo" like it was a command. My stomach turned. I swallowed hard. Lazaro didn't speak. He looked at the paper in Venturi's hand like it was a trigger. Then his gaze lifted to my face. And something in him shifted, not softened, changed. His eyes went sharper, colder, more territorial, like the result had turned me from target into treasure. Treasure is not freedom. Treasure gets locked in vaults. I forced my voice steady. So that's it. Venturi nodded. Yes, Signora. I stared at the wall behind him as if it would steady me. You'll tell the family. Venturi hesitated. Lazaro's voice cut in, lethal. You will tell no one. Venturi went pale. Signore, no one. Lazaro repeated. Venturi swallowed. Understood. He looked at me one last time, then at Lazaro, and backed out of the room like he'd just walked into a war he didn't want to be part of. The door shut. Silence again. Only this silence felt heavier. Because now there was something inside me the dynasty would kill for. My hand pressed to my stomach again, palm flat, protective. Lazaro moved then, slowly, deliberately, crossing the room until he stood in front of me. He didn't touch me immediately. He watched my face, my eyes, my mouth, as if he was looking for permission and refusing to ask for it. I lifted my chin. Don't. His gaze narrowed. Don't what? Don't act like this makes me yours, I said. His mouth didn't move. You were already my wife. I swallowed hard. And now I'm an incubator. The word tasted like poison. His eyes darkened. No. I laughed once, sharp. Yes, that's the only thing anyone cares about. He leaned closer. His voice dropped. Italian threaded through it like steel. Guarda me. Look at me. I did, because my body betrayed me by wanting a steadier thing than my own fear. You are not an incubator, he said, calm but fierce. You are not a schedule. You are not a strategy in their hands. My throat tightened. Then what am I? He stared at me for a long beat. Then he answered with the most terrifying truth he could give. My wife, he said, and the mother of my child. The words slammed into my ribs. My, not the dynasty's, not the patriarch's, his. Possession disguised as protection, protection disguised as claim. I should have recoiled. I did inside. But my body didn't move, because part of me, treacherous, exhausted, felt steadier hearing him say it like that than hearing the dynasty say heir like I wasn't human. I forced my voice sharp. You're gonna lock me down. Yes, he replied. The honesty made my stomach twist. I hate you, I whispered. No, he said quietly. You hate that you'll feel safer in my control than in theirs. I stared at him, breath shallow. Then I whispered the truth that tasted like blood. I hate that you're right. His jaw flexed. He didn't gloat. He didn't soften. He just moved his hand, slow, deliberate, and placed it over mine on my stomach. The touch was careful, not gentle like romance, careful like a man handling something valuable he didn't trust the world with. My breath caught. I went still. The contact didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a claim being set into my skin. Lazaro's voice was low. They will try to come for you now. My throat tightened. I know. His eyes held mine. They will try to separate you from me. My pulse spiked. They can't. He didn't smile. They'll try anyway. I swallowed hard. So what do we do? Lazaro's gaze went colder. We move first. He didn't announce the pregnancy to the house like a celebration. He announced it like a security threat. Within the hour, the West Wing changed. Locks replaced handles, guard rotations doubled, the staff list was cut in half, then cut again. Anyone with Bernardello connections was removed without discussion. The kitchen became sterile, sealed ingredients, bottled water only, every cup handled like evidence. It should have made me feel safe. It made me feel trapped. I walked into the corridor and found 2 new guards posted outside my bedroom door. They didn't look at me directly. Respect or fear. Either way, it was still surveillance. I turned and saw Raffaele at the end of the hall, speaking in low Italian into his earpiece, eyes hard. When he noticed me, he ended the call and approached. Signora, he said. I didn't soften. So the cage tightens. Raffaele's mouth tightened slightly. The threat increased. I stared at him. I'm not a threat. No, he said quietly. You're the prize. The words made my stomach roll. I pressed my palm to my stomach again, as if I could hold my own humanity in place. Where is Lazaro? I asked. Raffaele hesitated. Handling. Me? I cut in. Raffaele didn't deny it. Yes. He was honest like Lazaro. Efficient, not comforting. Tell him I want to see my grandfather, I said. Raffaele's eyes sharpened. Signora, I want him to look at me, I said, voice low. I want him to understand that I'm not a vessel he can order around anymore. Raffaele hesitated. Then quietly, he won't allow it. I laughed once, sharp. Of course he won't. Because now my body was not just mine. It was an asset with a heartbeat. I turned away and walked back into the sitting room, needing space from the hallway's eyes. And there, like the universe had a cruel sense of timing, Julia Toscana waited. She sat on the sofa as if she'd always belonged there. Pearl earrings, perfect posture, a calm face that hid cruelty like it was etiquette. Her gaze slid over me slowly, then down to my stomach as if she could see through my skin. Congratulations, she said softly. I didn't sit. Don't. Julia's smile was small. You're valuable now. The sentence hit like a slap. I stared at her. I was always valuable, I was just valuable to the wrong people. Julia's eyes sharpened. You're going to need discipline, she said. Pregnancy makes women careless. Pregnancy makes women hunted. That was the truth she didn't say. I lifted my chin. Pregnancy makes predators bolder. Julia's smile tightened. And it makes men territorial. My stomach nodded. She leaned slightly forward, voice lowering. Lazaro was never supposed to want you, she murmured. The words slid under my skin. I forced my voice steady. He doesn't want me. Julia's eyes flicked up to meet mine, sharp as glass. Then you don't understand the difference between strategy and possession. My throat tightened. Before I could answer, footsteps sounded in the hall. Not hurried. Controlled. Lazaro entered the room, and Julia stood immediately, composure perfect. Lazaro, she said. He didn't acknowledge her first. He looked at me. Then his gaze dropped to my stomach, then back to my face. Assessing, guarding, claiming. Out, he said to Julia. Julia's brows lifted. I'm only... Out, he repeated. Julia's mouth tightened, but she didn't argue. She left with smooth dignity, but her eyes flashed at me once, warning. When the door shut, the air changed again. Lazaro walked to me and stopped too close. What did she say? He asked. His voice wasn't jealous. It was controlled violence. She congratulated me, I replied. His gaze narrowed. What else? I held his eyes. She said I'm valuable now. His jaw clenched, and, he pressed, I exhaled slowly. She said you were never supposed to want me. Silence snapped. Lazaro's eyes went flat. Do you? I asked quietly. The question fell out before I could stop it. Not because I wanted the answer, because I needed to know what kind of danger I was living inside. Lazaro didn't respond with softness. He responded with truth. I want you alive, he said. I swallowed hard. That's not what I asked. His gaze held mine. It's the only answer you get today. Anger flared in me because anger was easier than hope. I stepped back half a pace, breathing fast. So I'm still just... He closed the distance in one step and put his hand at my waist. Firm, territorial, not a caress, a boundary. You are my wife, he said. The words were a claim and a warning. To whom? I asked, voice shaking with control. To everyone, he replied. My breath hitched, because that was the problem. Everyone. The dynasty. The enemies outside the gates. The people inside the gates, the women in pearls, the men with papers, the doctors with syringes. They would all come now, because now the pregnancy made me the most valuable woman in the empire, and the most trapped. We were summoned to the Bernardello estate that evening anyway. Not because Lazaro agreed, because the patriarch's command traveled like poison through alliances. A dying man can still pull strings. The dinner was smaller, more private. No spectacle, no smiles. Just the core family circle and the weight of what the pregnancy meant. My grandfather sat at the head of the table, oxygen hissing softly. His eyes fixed on me the second I entered. Not my face. My stomach. I wanted to vomit. Lazaro's hand stayed at my back as we walked in, guiding, claiming. My grandfather's gaze flicked to it and narrowed. We sat. The room felt tighter than before, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the confirmation. My uncle couldn't help himself. We received word that Venturi... Careful, Lazaro said quietly. My uncle's mouth snapped shut. My grandfather's eyes cut to Lazaro. Is it true? He demanded. My stomach dropped. No greeting, no concern. Just the question. Is it true? I forced my voice steady. Yes. The room exhaled like it had been starving. My aunt pressed a hand to her chest. A cousin smiled too brightly. A man near the wall nodded like he'd just secured an investment. My grandfather's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. My heir, he said, voice hoarse, triumphant. The words hit my spine like ice. Not my grandchild. Not Francesca. My heir. I went still. Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet internal refusal. Lazaro moved beside me. His hand slid from my back to my waist, firm, visible. Then he spoke, calm as death. My wife, he said first. The room froze. My grandfather's eyes narrowed. Lazaro continued, voice even colder. My child. Silence detonated. My grandfather's mouth tightened. You forget. I remember, Lazaro cut in quietly. Everything. The words weren't shouted. They were worse. They were certainty. My grandfather stared at him for a long beat, oxygen hissing between them like a third voice. Then he leaned back slowly, expression tightening into old rage. This family survives because it owns its future, he said. Lazaro's gaze didn't flinch. This family will survive, Lazaro replied, if it learns what it no longer owns. My pulse hammered. The room felt like it might combust. And in that moment, with my grandfather's eyes burning and Lazaro's hand heavy at my waist, I understood the new shape of my captivity. Pregnancy didn't make me safer. It made me the battlefield. And my husband had just declared, in front of the dynasty, that he intended to claim the battlefield as his.
Chapter 10. Lazaro. They came for her with paperwork first. Not guns. Not poison. Not a man in a mask slipping through my gate. A folder. A stamped order delivered by a smiling attorney at 9:30 in the morning, as if the ability to speak politely made kidnapping moral. Raphael met him at the front hall. I watched from the balcony above, unseen, listening. The attorney didn't look nervous. He looked confident. That confidence was the tell. He believed law could protect him from men like me. It couldn't, but belief makes people sloppy, and sloppy gives you openings. Signor Toscano, the attorney said, voice practiced. We're here on behalf of the Bernardello estate. Raphael didn't invite him in. State your business. The attorney lifted the folder like a priest lifting scripture. A protective medical directive. The signora's condition requires oversight beyond what? Raphael's face didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. What condition? The attorney smiled. Pregnancy. My blood went cold. Not because the word surprised me, because of the way he used it. Like it was a key. Like it granted access. Like Francesca's body had become public property the moment it carried a heartbeat. I descended the stairs without hurrying. The marble under my shoes was quiet. The air in my house tightened as I approached. Raphael saw me and stepped aside. The attorney turned, smile widening. Signore. I stopped in front of him. I didn't offer my hand. I didn't offer a greeting. I looked at the folder. Then I looked at his face. Who sent you? I asked. The attorney held his smile. The patriarch and counsel. It's for the child's safety. The child's safety. A lie. A pretty phrase used to mask ownership. Raphael's voice stayed calm. You're not entering. The attorney's smile didn't falter. We don't need to enter. This is a directive. A requirement. If the signor refuses medical oversight, the family will be forced to. To what? I asked quietly. The attorney's eyes flicked to mine, measuring whether I understood the language he was using. He decided I did. His voice lowered slightly, almost compassionate. To petition for temporary guardianship of the unborn heir. There it was. The ugliness under the silk. Guardianship. They wanted the law to label her unstable, controlled, endangered, anything that justified removal. Anything that turned my protection into undue influence. Anything that turned her resistance into medical risk. I took the folder from his hands. He didn't stop me. He thought I was going to read it. I opened it, flipped through the pages quickly. Every word was a trap. Concerning behavior, isolation, limited family contact, potential coercion by spouse, recommended relocation to Casa Aurelia for medical stability. Casa Aurelia, the private maternity facility with enough bribes and private entrances to disappear a woman without ever calling it disappearance. My jaw tightened until it ached. I tore the folder in half. Once, twice. Paper split like skin. The attorney's smile died. You can't, he began. I stepped closer, voice flat. You're standing in my house. His eyes widened, fear finally cracking through. This is a legal order. It's a legal attempt. I corrected. To steal my wife. Raphael moved one step closer behind me. Silent. The attorney swallowed hard. Signor Toscano, the family has rights. I leaned in just enough for him to feel the threat in my calm. The family has a dying man and a collapsing empire. I said, they do not have my wife. The attorney's throat bobbed. I held the torn pages up, let them flutter once in the air between us. Then I dropped them on the marble at his feet. Pick them up. I said. He blinked. Excuse me, pick them up. I repeated. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Raphael like he expected help. Raphael didn't move. The attorney bent slowly, humiliation crawling across his face as he gathered torn paper from my floor like scraps. When he stood again, his hands shook. I nodded toward the door. Leave. He swallowed. The family will escalate. I tilted my head. Good. He stared at me, confused. I stepped closer. It means they'll show me their full plan. The attorney backed away, then turned and left quickly, almost running once he hit the front steps. Raphael watched him go, then looked at me. Casa Aurelia. He said quietly. Yes, I replied. Raphael's eyes were hard. They want her in a facility they control. They want her out of my house. I corrected. Because they can't reach her in it anymore. Raphael nodded once. And if they can't reach her legally, they'll reach her physically. I finished. I turned toward the west wing. My blood was already cold enough to think. Francesca was in the sitting room when I entered, book in hand. Posture too still. Like she'd been trying to force calm into her bones by reading words that weren't about her body. She looked up immediately. Her eyes sharpened. Something happened. I didn't lie. They sent an attorney. Her jaw clenched. What did they want? I moved closer. Hands settling at her waist, firm, grounding, territorial. She stiffened at the contact, then didn't pull away. They want you relocated, I said, to Casa Aurelia. Her breath hitched. The name meant something to her too, because she'd heard it in whispered conversations, private births, controlled outcomes, dynastic children delivered like assets. Her voice went low. So they can take the baby. Yes, I said. She went still. Then her mouth twisted. And what do they do with me after? The question was a knife. Not because she didn't know. Because she did. Replaceable after success. Useful until the heir exists. Then optional. Her eyes burned, but her voice stayed steady. Tell me. I held her gaze. They plan to separate you. Her throat moved. From the baby. I continued. From me. Her hand went to her stomach. Protective. And if you resist, I added, voice cold, they'll call you unstable. She swallowed hard. For a second, the room was too quiet. Then she whispered, so the child is theirs. No, I said. Her eyes snapped to mine. You keep saying that like it changes reality. I stepped closer, voice lower. It changes what I'm willing to do. Her breath caught. Raphael appeared in the doorway. Signore. I didn't look away from Francesca. Speak. We pulled the attorney's communications. Raphael said. He called Bernadello counsel before arriving. We traced the signal. And, I said. Raphael's eyes sharpened. Casa Aurelia is staffed by 2 men on Liliana Caruso's payroll. Liliana. The name slid through the air like poison. The rival woman I'd already flagged, connected. Ambitious. Polished cruelty in a silk dress. Francesca's eyes narrowed. Caruso. I watched her face. She hated that name. Good. Hatred keeps you awake. Raphael continued. Also, there's a private transport team assigned to maternity transfers. Driver, medic, security. All bought. Francesca's breath turned shallow. They'll call it a medical emergency, she whispered. Yes, that was the play. Trigger a crisis, stress, fainting, blood pressure, risk to the baby, then remove her under the banner of care. Care is the most effective weapon against women, because if they resist, they're irrational. If they comply, they're taken. My jaw clenched. Raphael's gaze flicked to Francesca. We can lock down further. Francesca's eyes flashed. No, Raphael froze. I didn't. I watched her. She stepped forward, voice tight. Every time they push, you tighten the cage. And every time you tighten it, they call me a hostage. I didn't soften. You are a hostage. Her eyes burned. Then stop helping them build the narrative. The words hit clean. Because she was right. If they couldn't take her physically, they would take the story. And if they took the story, they could take her with applause. Raphael spoke carefully. Signora, the threat is. I know what the threat is. Francesca snapped. I'm living inside it. I stepped closer, hand returning to her waist, firm, steady. You want agency, I said quietly. Her gaze snapped to mine. Yes, you get it, I said. Raphael's brows lifted. Francesca's eyes narrowed. Suspicious. I didn't explain with softness. I explained with strategy. We set the trap. I said, we don't wait for them to manufacture an emergency. We manufacture the bait. Francesca's jaw tightened. You want to make me the bait? No, I corrected. I want to make their plan visible. Raphael nodded once, already understanding. Francesca stared at me. How? I turned to Raphael. Casa Aurelia. I said. Raphael's eyes went cold. We can get inside. Yes, I replied. We identify the bot staff. We identify the transport team. Francesca's voice was low. And the lawyer? The lawyer is noise. I said. The clinic is the blade. Francesca swallowed hard. And Liliana? She pressed. Raphael's mouth tightened. Her network is layered. But this, he gestured slightly, is a point of entry. Francesca's eyes flashed. So we cut it. Yes, I said. She stared at me for a beat, then asked the question that mattered more than strategy. And what do you do with my family? She whispered. My gaze turned colder. Your family. I said. Plan to use your body. Take your child. And call it duty. Her throat tightened. I will answer duty with consequence. I continued. Francesca didn't flinch. Good. She wasn't weak. She was furious and trapped and learning what power cost. Raphael stepped forward. Signore, there's more. I looked at him. Speak. Raphael held up his tablet. We intercepted internal Bernadello communications. A directive labeled Phase 2. Francesca's face went white. Phase 2. Raphael's voice stayed professional. Phase 1. Secure conception. Phase 2. Stabilize succession by removing mother from decision-making. My wife's breath punched out of her. The words weren't euphemistic. They were operational. They had written her life into phases like she was an asset being processed. Francesca's hand went to her stomach again, protective and shaking. I watched her swallow rage hard enough to choke on it. Then she whispered, voice tight with something that sounded like grief. They never intended to let me raise my own child. No, I said. Her eyes lifted to mine, bright with fury and pain. They would have taken the baby. Yes, I replied. And then what? She asked, voice shaking now. Send me away. Institutionalize me. Kill me. The last word fell like a stone. Raphael didn't speak. Neither did I, because we all knew it was possible. In dynasties, mothers are only sacred until they become inconvenient. I stepped closer and lowered my voice, Italian threading through it like a vow. Nonce etc. I murmured. It won't happen. Francesca's eyes burned. How can you promise that? I didn't promise with words. I promised with action. I took the tablet from Raphael and held it in my hand, then looked at Francesca. We leave, I said. Her eyes widened. Raphael's posture tightened. Signore, not yet. I clarified. But soon. The estate is compromised by narrative. The city is compromised by bought clinics. Francesca's breath came fast. Leaving means war. Yes, I said. She stared at me like she was trying to decide whether war was worse than being processed into Phase 2. Then she whispered, where? I leaned closer, voice calm. Somewhere the dynasty can't reach with paper. Her jaw clenched. And the baby? My child stays with its mother. I said, cold and final. Francesca's throat moved as she swallowed. Then she asked, quieter. And what about me? I held her gaze. You stay with me. I said. Her eyes flashed. That's not freedom. No, I agreed. It's survival. Raphael's phone buzzed. He checked it, face tightening. Signore, he said. Incoming. Bernadello Council. They're requesting an emergency meeting. I didn't look away from Francesca. They're not requesting. Raphael nodded once. They're ordering. Francesca's mouth twisted. Of course they are. I exhaled slowly, then turned to Raphael. Arrange it. I said. Raphael blinked. You're going. No, I said. I'm letting them think I am. Francesca's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? I stepped closer to her, hands settling at her waist again. Firm. It means we make them show their hand. I said. And we do it on my terms. Her breath hitched. And my terms. I held her gaze. Tell me. Her voice was steady now, steel returning. If they try to call me unstable, I want to speak. My jaw tightened. No, her eyes flared. Lazaro, you speaking gives them material. I said. I don't care. She snapped. I'm not going to be silent while they write phases about my body. Her fury was a blade. Good. But fury without strategy gets people taken. I leaned closer, voice low. You will speak. I said. When it cuts them, not when it feeds them. Her breath shook. Then she nodded once. Sharp. Fine. Raphael stepped closer. Signore, the meeting is set. Bernadello Council will attend, plus 2 family representatives. Good, I said. And Venturi, Raphael added. They demanded he be present. Francesca went rigid. They want the doctor. I looked at her. They want legitimacy. Francesca's voice was quiet. They want a signature to move me. I nodded once. Yes. Her hand tightened around the edge of the chair, knuckles whitening. I placed my palm over her hand, firm. Steady. not tenderness. An anchor. They won't get it. I murmured. Her eyes lifted to mine, bright and furious. Promise. I didn't promise softly. I promise like a man making a killing decision. I will cut off every hand that reaches. I said. Her throat moved. And in that moment, I saw it, the shift in her. Not acceptance. Not surrender. Alignment. The moment she stopped viewing me only as captor and started viewing me as the weapon between her and the dynasty. That was dangerous. Because when a woman like Francesca starts aligning with your darkness, she stops being someone you protect. She becomes someone you build empires with. Raphael's voice cut in. Signore, should we relocate the Signora now? I looked at Francesca. She looked back. Jaw tight. Eyes steady. Yes, I said. Francesca's eyes narrowed. Where? A safe house. I replied. Temporary. Her mouth twisted. Another cage. A fortress. I corrected. Her eyes flashed. And you? I'll meet you there. I said. She stared at me like she wanted to argue. Then her voice dropped. Sharp. Don't leave me alone with your men. I held her gaze. You won't be alone. Raphael stepped forward. I'll personally escort the Signora. Francesca didn't look at him. She looked at me. And if this is a trap, she said quietly, you make it end. I leaned closer. Voice low. It ends today. Her breath hitched. I turned to Raphael. Move her through the service route. No phones. No visible convoy. Raphael nodded. Yes, Signore. Francesca stood. Her posture was still proud, still sharp, but I could see the tremor she was hiding. Not fear of me. Fear of being taken by people who called it care. I stepped closer and placed my hand at her waist one last time, firm, territorial. She stiffened. Then she leaned into it a fraction. A tiny betrayal of her pride. I spoke in Italian, quiet enough that only she could hear. Non ti lascio. I murmured. I won't leave you. Her eyes flashed. She didn't say thank you. She didn't soften. She just nodded once and walked out with Raphael straight-backed. Controlled. A woman refusing to look like prey, even while she was being hunted. When the door shut behind her, the house felt emptier. And that emptiness was dangerous. Because it made room for one thought I shouldn't have wanted. They tried to take her from me. Not the child. Her. They'd built phases around her life like she was disposable. They'd written her motherhood into a plan that ended with removal. That meant the dynasty had made a calculation. That meant they believed I would accept it for legacy. They were wrong. I picked up my phone and called the one man who could move bodies without leaving paperwork. Bring the car, I said, and bring the black file. A pause. Then, yes, Signore. I looked toward the west wing, toward the room where my wife had slept, where she'd trembled against my chest, where she'd told me she didn't want to need me, and I'd admitted I didn't either. Need is weakness. But losing her would be worse than weakness. It would be failure. And I don't fail. I walked out of my office and toward the front doors. Because now the war wasn't theoretical. Now the dynasty wasn't pressuring. It was executing. And by the time Bernadello Council sat down at that emergency meeting, he was going to learn the only law that mattered in my world. They can write phases about my wife's body. But the moment they try to enact them, I burn the plan down with everyone inside it. And then I take her out of their reach permanently. The empire could rot. They do not get her.
Chapter 11. Francesca. The safe house smelled like bleach and gun oil. Not because anyone lived here, because this place existed for one purpose, survival. The walls were bare. The windows were blocked. The air was too still, like the building itself was holding its breath. A single lamp burned in the corner, throwing weak light across a room that had no softness except the blanket folded on the couch. I hated it. Not because it was uncomfortable. Because it proved I was no longer a woman with a home. I was a woman being moved, a woman being hidden, a woman being protected in the same way jewelry is protected, locked away, counted, watched. Raffaele stood near the door with two men posted outside. He didn't sit. He didn't relax. His phone was in his hand like a weapon he could use without firing. He kept glancing at the clock. I kept pretending not to notice. How long? I asked. Raffaele didn't look at me. As long as needed, Signora. I stared at him. That's not an answer. His jaw tightened slightly. Signore Toscano is in an emergency meeting with Bernadello Council. The words slid into my stomach like ice. Meeting. Paper. Law. That was how they tried to take women like me. quietly, politely, with signatures that looked clean. And the worst part was that if Lazaro was in a meeting, it meant he thought words were still worth trying. Words were the dynasty's favorite weapon. Because they didn't leave bruises, they left records. A knock sounded sharp, controlled on the safe house door. Every man in the room moved. Raffaele lifted a hand, signaling silence. His other hand went to the weapon under his jacket. "Name," he called. A voice answered from outside, calm, official. "Courier. Legal delivery." Legal delivery. My pulse jumped. Raffaele's eyes flicked toward me. One brief look that held a warning. "Don't move." Then he opened the door a fraction. Not enough for a body to enter. Enough for a hand. A thick envelope slid through the gap. Raffaele snatched it, locked the door again, and turned the envelope over in his hands. The seal was Bernardello. My family's crest pressed into wax like a brand. My throat tightened. Raffaele didn't open it. He held it out to me. "Signora," he said carefully. I took it with steady hands. The wax was still warm, as if they wanted me to imagine their fingerprints on it. I broke the seal with my nail, pulled the letter out. The paper was heavy, expensive. The handwriting was my grandfather's. Of course it was. He wanted the cruelty to be personal. "Francesca, you are making a public spectacle of a private duty. This pregnancy is not yours alone. It is the continuity of what I built. You will return to Bernardello care immediately, where medical oversight can be ensured. Your husband is an alliance, not a guardian. His influence is inappropriate and will be corrected. If you refuse, you will force me to take measures that will embarrass you and protect the heir. Do not mistake my illness for weakness, G." My hand tightened around the paper. The words blurred for a second. Not tears. Rage. I read it again, slower. Your husband is an alliance, not a guardian. His influence will be corrected. Corrected. Like I was a math problem, like my marriage was a mistake they could erase once it had served its purpose. My stomach twisted. I pressed my palm to it automatically. There was nothing to feel yet. No kick, no movement, just the knowledge that my body was now carrying something everyone wanted to own. Raffaele watched me in silence. "What did he say?" he asked quietly. I looked up. "He said I'm a spectacle." Raffaele's jaw tightened. "He's escalating narrative." I laughed once, sharp. "He's escalating control." Raffaele didn't disagree. He just said, "Bernardello Council will use this to file, petition, guardianship, medical instability, undue influence by spouse." They were building a story where I was helpless and Lazaro was dangerous. And the most humiliating part? They weren't entirely wrong about the danger. Lazaro was dangerous, just not in the way they wanted to frame him. I folded the letter carefully, like it deserved respect, it didn't, and placed it on the table. Then I stood. Raffaele's eyes sharpened. "Signora? I'm not sitting here while they write my life into legal language," I said. He stepped slightly into my path, not touching, not blocking completely. "A warning. Your protection detail is a cage," I cut in. Raffaele's mouth tightened. "It's a perimeter. A perimeter built around my body," I said coldly. His gaze held mine. "Because your body is the battlefield." I went still. Because that was the truth I'd been trying not to name. A battlefield doesn't get to choose peace. It gets defended. I exhaled slowly and forced my voice even. "Call Lazaro," I said. Raffaele hesitated. "He's in the meeting." "Call him," I repeated. Raffaele lifted the phone, pressed a button, and put it to his ear. I didn't hear what was said. I watched his face tighten, then settle into professional stillness. He lowered the phone and looked at me. "Signore will call when he can," he said. My jaw clenched. Of course. Even now, even pregnant, even valuable, I was still expected to wait. Wait while men negotiated my body like a resource. I turned away, pacing the small room. 3 steps to the wall, 3 steps back, a prisoner's pace. I hated myself for feeling panic. Panic was weakness. Weakness became evidence. I forced it down. Then the safe house phone rang. Not a normal ring. A secure tone, low, controlled, like an alarm trying not to be heard. Raffaele answered instantly. His posture shifted. The room tightened. "Yes, signore," he said. He listened. His eyes flicked to me. Then he handed me the phone. "He wants you," Raffaele said quietly. I took the receiver. My voice came out steady, even as my heart hammered. "Lazaro." Silence on the line. 1 beat. Then his voice, calm and lethal. "Are you safe?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Did they contact you?" he asked. I glanced at the folded letter on the table. "Yes." A pause, then colder. "What did he say?" He said I'm a spectacle, I replied. He ordered me to return to Bernadello care. He said your influence will be corrected. The silence on the line turned heavier. I could hear his breathing, controlled, quiet. Listen, he said finally. The word was a command, it always was. I braced. They offered me everything, he said. My throat tightened. Everything. Yes, he replied. Leadership, majority stake in the Bernardello holdings, immediate succession support, legitimacy on paper. My stomach dropped. That was the empire. That was the crown. That was the thing men like Lazaro were trained to value more than breath. And in exchange, I whispered, his voice went colder. You, he said. One word. A blade. And the child, he added. My hand went to my stomach again, fingers pressing as if I could hold the baby inside me away from the world. What exactly? I asked, voice shaking with control. They want you relocated to Casa Aurelia, Lazaro said, under medical oversight. They want the baby delivered under their supervision, and they want me to sign a statement acknowledging concerns about your stability. My vision narrowed. A red haze pressed at the edges. They want you to call me unstable, I whispered. They want me to make it believable, he replied. My throat tightened until it hurt. And what did you say? I asked. The pause was short, but it existed. And in that pause, I felt the fear I'd been refusing. Fear that every man chooses legacy when the cost is a woman, even if the woman is his wife, even if the woman is carrying his child. Lazaro's voice came through the line like a verdict. I said no. The air left my lungs, not relief, shock. Because no in our world is expensive. No costs blood. I pressed the receiver tighter to my ear. You said no. Yes, he repeated. My throat worked. What did it cost you? His voice stayed calm. Everything they offered. And then, quieter, more dangerous in its simplicity, it cost me the dynasty's approval. My pulse hammered, because dynasties don't forgive refusal. They punish it. They erase it. They kill it if they have to. You just declared war, I whispered. I declared boundaries, he replied. They can call it war if they want. My stomach rolled. A tremor went through my hands. I forced my voice steady. What happens now? His answer was immediate. They'll escalate, he said. They'll try to file emergency guardianship. They'll move physically through Casa Aurelia's network. They'll attempt a medical crisis to justify removal. My skin went cold. And you, I whispered. His voice dropped into Italian, rough and controlled. I'm coming back to you, he said. Resta lì. Stay there. The line clicked. Dead. I stood in the middle of the safe house room with the receiver still in my hand, feeling the ground shift beneath everything I thought I understood. Lazaro Toscano had just refused power for me. Not romance, not softness, but refusal anyway. That kind of choice rewrites a woman's bones. Raffaele watched me carefully. What did he say? He asked. I swallowed hard. He said no. Raffaele's jaw tightened. Then they'll move. I nodded once, slow. Yes. Raffaele stepped toward the door. I'll double perimeter. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. Because now we weren't just hiding, we were waiting for retaliation. Minutes stretched, then an hour. The safe house stayed too quiet. I couldn't sit. Sitting felt like surrender. I paced again, 3 steps. Then headlights swept across the blocked window. An engine cut, footsteps. The door opened, and Lazaro entered like the room belonged to him, even here, in a place built for hiding. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't there before, a hardness that looked like finality. Behind him, Raffaele stepped in and shut the door. The guards outside repositioned. The safe house sealed itself around us. Lazaro's gaze hit me immediately, scanning, assessing, checking for harm like it was instinct now. You're pale, he said. I'm angry, I replied. His mouth didn't move. Good, I stared at him. You said no. He didn't deny it. Yes. Why? I asked. The question tore out of me, sharper than intended. Because I didn't trust gifts. I didn't trust choices, not from men trained by dynasties, not from a husband who had once agreed to a breeding arrangement like it was strategy. Lazaro stepped closer until the air thickened. His hand came to my waist, firm, anchoring. Because they were going to take you, he said quietly, and you didn't want them to take your heir, I snapped. His eyes narrowed. My heir doesn't exist without you. The words hit hard. Not love, logic, but logic that included me in a way my family never had. I swallowed, throat tight. They offered you everything. Yes, he said, and you chose. My voice caught. Me. Lazaro's jaw flexed. He didn't soften. He didn't smile. He said it like a man stating fact. Yes, My chest tightened. A sound left me that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't a sob. I hated that my eyes burned. I forced my chin up. Don't do that. His gaze sharpened. Do what? Make me matter, I whispered, furious at how weak that sounded. Lazaro leaned closer, voice low. Saif, you mattered the moment they tried to reduce you, he said. I don't tolerate reduction. My breath hitched. That's not, I swallowed. That's not kindness. No, he agreed. It's ownership. There it was. The word I hated. The word that made safety feel like a trap. I stepped back a fraction, trying to reclaim my air. So I'm still in a cage. Lazaro followed, closing the space. Yes, he said, but now it's a cage they can't reach through. My pulse hammered. And what does that make you? I demanded. His voice dropped, Italian threaded through it like steel. Il muro, he murmured. The wall. I stared at him. Because walls don't ask, walls don't negotiate, walls don't apologize, walls just stop things from getting in. I whispered, raw, and what if I don't want a wall? What if I want freedom? His gaze held mine. Freedom comes after survival. I clenched my jaw. And when do I get to breathe? He stepped closer, hand still at my waist, and spoke quietly. Now, he said. Then he did the only thing that could stop my spiral. He kissed me, not sweet, not playful, a controlled, grounding kiss that cut through panic like a blade. For a second, I went rigid. Then my hands grabbed his shirt, fists tight, anger and relief tangled together. I kissed him back, not because I forgave him, but because my body needed something solid to hold onto that wasn't my own fear. He broke the kiss only long enough to breathe. Look at me, he murmured. I did. His eyes were dark and steady. No one takes you, he said. My throat tightened. You can't promise that. He didn't blink. I can. The certainty in his voice made my pulse spike. It should have terrified me. It did. And it made something else in me crack open too, something I'd spent my whole life starving. To be chosen. Not as a phase, not as a function, as a person worth losing power for. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. What did you lose? I whispered. Lazaro's jaw flexed. The Bernardello pipeline, he said. Certain partners, the illusion of cooperation. And your family? I added. His eyes went colder. They were never my family. The statement was brutal, honest, and somehow it made the next truth inevitable. He leaned in again, close enough that his breath warmed my mouth. They asked me to sign you over, he said. So I signed something else. My eyes narrowed. What? Lazaro pulled a folded document from inside his jacket and held it up. Not a contract. A renunciation. A declaration. I took it with shaking hands and read the first line. I, Lazzaro Toscano, formally withdraw from Bernardello succession support and dissolve all cooperative oversight agreements regarding my wife, Francesca Toscano, and her medical care. My breath caught. He'd burned the bridge in ink, not just with threats, with paperwork that would detonate across boardrooms. You made it official, I whispered. Yes, he said. My hands trembled around the paper. You didn't have to do that, I said, voice tight. I did, he replied. Because if it wasn't written, it could be twisted. If it wasn't official, it could be challenged. He'd learned the dynasty's language and used it like a knife. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I looked up at him. Why are you doing this? His eyes held mine for a long beat. Then he said, voice low, controlled, terrifying in its clarity, because they don't get you. The sentence landed like a hook in my ribs. My breath shook. I hated how much it hit me. I hated that I wanted to believe it. I whispered, you said that like it's personal. His gaze darkened. It is, he said. The air between us tightened until it felt like the room had shrunk. I stepped closer without deciding to. That was the most dangerous part. I put the paper down on the table and lifted my chin. If you choose me, I said, voice shaking with control, you don't get to half choose. His eyes narrowed. I don't do half. My pulse hammered. Then prove it, I whispered. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. He didn't ask again. He kissed me, deeper this time, slower, deliberate enough to make my body stop trembling. I clutched his shirt like I needed the fact of him to keep from falling apart. He moved us toward the couch, not dragging, not forcing, guiding. I followed. Not surrender. Choice. That was the difference. And it terrified me more than the cage ever had. He sat and pulled me into his lap, one arm around my waist, firm and steady. The closeness wasn't sweet. It was protective possession. His mouth brushed my jaw, then my lips again of kisses that stayed intense without turning explicit. Breath, pressure, restraint. I'd have felt his control like a wall around my panic. and my body traitor relaxed into it. Because for the first time, I wasn't being used to secure a future for people who didn't love me. I was being held by the man who had just burned power to keep me. My breath broke on a small sound. He stilled instantly, hand tightening at my waist. "Look at me," he murmured. I did. His eyes were dark, focused. "You're safe," he said. I laughed once, bitter and broken. "You keep saying that like it can erase what they did." "It won't erase it," he said. "It stops it from continuing." My throat tightened. I kissed him again, harder, angry, needing something to hurt that wasn't my own heart. He let me. Then he slowed it, controlling the pace, keeping it from tipping into something reckless. His hand slid up to my hair, fingers holding gently, not pulling, not yanking, just steadying me. I hated how safe it felt. I hated more that I wanted it. My hands shook. "I don't want to need you," I whispered against his mouth. His voice was low, rough. "Neither do I." The admission hit like a bruise, because it meant he understood the danger too. Still, he didn't let go. He kept me close, kissing me until the shaking eased, until my breathing slowed, until my body stopped bracing for the next threat. When the intensity finally settled, he didn't move away. He didn't leave me sitting there like a woman who'd just given something she shouldn't have. He shifted and held me with my face in his neck, one arm around my waist, firm and unmoving. No speeches, no promises that would sound like lies. Just containment. Aftercare, the only kind a man like him could give. Silent, steady, undeniable. I stayed there, breathing against his throat, listening to his heartbeat like proof he was real. Outside the safe house, cars passed. The city moved, the dynasty plotted. But inside this room, for one moment, the world couldn't reach me. My voice came quiet, almost lost in his collar. "They're gonna come harder." His hand tightened once at my waist. "Let them." I lifted my head enough to meet his eyes. "And you," I whispered. His gaze went flat with lethal certainty. "I already chose," he said, a beat. Then he added, quieter, "And it wasn't romantic. It was war. Now I finish it." The words hit like a door closing. And I knew how Chapter 12 would begin. Not with negotiations, not with waiting, not with fear, but with the dynasty realizing that the husband they forced on me had stopped protecting the heir and started protecting me like a man already too far gone to be reasoned with.
Chapter 12. Lazaro, they didn't wait. At 6:12, the emergency petition hit the court docket. At 6:19, Bernadello Council sent the same PDF to 3 journalists, 2 board partners, and 1 bishop who still pretended dynasties were sacred. At 6:31, my phone rang with a blocked number. I answered anyway. A man's voice, calm, educated, cruel, spoke like the law was a blade and he'd already slid it in. "Signor Toscano," Bernadello Council said, "you're holding a pregnant woman under coercion. We have affidavits. We have witnesses. We have an emergency order for relocation. Relocation. Casa Aurelia. The facility they'd bought for clean abductions." I smiled without humor. "You filed early," I said. A pause. He didn't like that I wasn't panicking. "This isn't a game," he said. "No," I replied. "It's an execution attempt. You're just trying to do it with stationery." He exhaled sharply. "Return her to her family's medical oversight. Cooperate. Preserve your standing. You can still what?" I asked softly. "Pretend you didn't try to drug my wife." Silence. Then a brittle laugh. "Allegations. Unproven. You'll prove them," I said. "Today." His voice hardened. "If you force this into public, I will." I interrupted. "You'll ruin her," he snapped. There it was. The favorite lie. That women break when their stories go public. But Francesca was not the kind of woman who broke. She was the kind of woman who became a weapon once she was cornered. Bernadello Council lowered his voice like a priest offering mercy. "You don't understand what you're touching," he said. "You are an alliance, not a king. The patriarch is dying," I said calmly. "And you're about to learn what happens when a dying man tries to take my wife with him." I ended the call. Then I looked at Raphael. He was already in the safe house living room. Jacket on, gun at his side, tablet in his hand. "Location," he said. "Bernadello Estate." I replied. Raphael's eyes narrowed. "You're walking into their house while they're filing emergency orders." "Yes," I said. "That's dangerous," he said. I met his gaze. Good. Danger meant clarity. It meant everyone stopped pretending. Francesca stood near the window with the blinds closed, one hand on her stomach, the other braced against the wall like she was holding herself upright on pride. She didn't ask what was happening. She already knew. She turned when she heard my voice. "They filed," she said, not a question. "Yes," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "They're going to call me unstable." "Yes," I said again. Her eyes flashed. "And they'll say you're coercing me." I didn't soften. "Yes." She stepped closer, fury contained. "Then I speak." I held her gaze. "Not yet." Her nostrils flared. "Lazaro, you speak," I said. "When it cuts." Her throat moved. She hated being told no. She hated it even more when she understood the strategy. Raphael cleared his throat. "Signore, the court hearing is set for noon." "No," Francesca said sharply. "They're moving too fast. They're dying," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Who?" "The patriarch," I replied. "And the empire. So they're trying to secure the heir before either of them collapses." Francesca's hand tightened on her stomach. Then she lifted her chin. "So we make them collapse first." "Good." That was my wife. I stepped closer and put my hand at her waist, firm, anchoring. "Stay behind me," I said. Her eyes burned. "I don't hide." "This isn't hiding," I replied. "This is positioning." Her mouth tightened. She didn't argue. Raphael spoke quietly. "Cars are ready. We'll use the service route." I nodded once. "Venturi." Raphael lifted his tablet. "He's en route to the Bernadello estate with the sealed toxicology results." "Good. Because paper can be a weapon if you use it like one." "And Marco?" I asked. Raphael's face went cold. "He gave us the intermediary. The intermediary gave us the payment chain." "And counsel?" I pressed. Raphael's mouth tightened. "Not yet." I nodded. "We'll get him today." Francesca's gaze sharpened. "You're walking into that estate to trap him." "Yes," I replied. Her throat moved. "And if he refuses?" I looked at her. "Calm. Then he bleeds in public." Her eyes didn't flinch. She understood what it meant to choose war. I leaned in and spoke in Italian, low enough to be only hers. "Non ti lascio," I murmured. "I won't leave you." Her eyes flashed anger, fear, something sharp that wasn't softness. Then she nodded once. "Let's end it," she said. The Bernadello estate looked the same as it always did, marble. Gates, guards who believed they belonged to history. But the air was different, because now the dynasty was desperate, and desperate dynasties make mistakes. We arrived with 3 vehicles and no announcement. The gate tried to stall us. I didn't slow down. Raphael stepped out first, approached the guard, and said one quiet sentence. "I advise you to open that gate." The guard hesitated. Then he looked past. Raphael, at me, at Francesca inside the car, at the way my men were positioned. He opened the gate. We drove in. The courtyard was full of people. Not guests. Functionaries. Lawyers. Doctors. Security. A small cluster of family members dressed like they were attending a funeral and pretending it was a board meeting. Francesca stepped out of the car with her spine straight and her chin lifted. No softness. No trembling. A pregnant woman who looked like she'd bite. I put my hand at her lower back, territorial. Visible. Not because she needed steadying. Because the room needed the reminder. Bernadello counsel stood near the front steps with a folder in his hand and a smile on his face. Smug. He believed his paperwork had already won. The patriarch's oxygen tank hissed behind the tall glass doors. Even from here, you could feel the old man's presence like a shadow. Francesca's eyes locked onto her family. Her uncle's face tightened. Her aunt looked pale. Giulia Toscano stood to one side, pearls. Perfect posture, watching as if she'd come to see which empire bled first. And Vittoria Alighieri, too polished, too pleased, hovered near counsel like she wanted a front-row seat to my wife's humiliation. I didn't give her one. We walked toward the steps. Bernadello counsel raised his folder. "Signor Toscano." "Signora." Francesca didn't respond. I did. "You filed," I said. Counsel smiled. "We were forced. The signora's pregnancy requires." "No," I interrupted. "It requires the mother's consent. You forget she's not a corpse." The smile on his face tightened. He turned slightly toward Francesca. Voice gentler, weaponized softness. "Francesca, we're concerned for you," he said. "We have reports of isolation. Coercion." Francesca's eyes burned. You have reports of desperation. Counsel's smile flickered. He recovered quickly. The family is offering you care. Francesca's voice was ice. The family is offering me confinement with a prettier name. Vittoria laughed softly, cruelly. That laugh was a mistake. My gaze snapped to her. She stopped laughing. Good. I turned back to Counsel. You're calling this a medical matter? I said. Counsel nodded. Correct. Then we'll treat it like a medical matter. I replied. He frowned slightly. Meaning, the front doors opened. Dr. Venturi walked out carrying a sealed envelope and a small hard drive case. Behind him, my men carried a second item, a clear evidence bag containing the altered coffee grounds tin. Venturi approached. Face careful. Signor Toscano, he said. I didn't look at him. I looked at Counsel. Present it. I said. Venturi held up the envelope. Lab-confirmed toxicology. He said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sedative contamination consistent with forced incapacitation. The courtyard went still. My uncle's face drained. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth. Counsel's smile died. Francesca didn't move, but her hand tightened at her stomach. Vittoria's eyes widened. Giulia's gaze sharpened with interest. Venturi continued, voice steady. The source was the household coffee. A secondary tin was planted. This was intentional. Counsel's voice snapped. Too loud. That proves nothing about. It proves intent. I cut in calmly. To incapacitate a pregnant woman. Counsel's mouth tightened. He tried to pivot, lawyer instinct, back to narrative. Even if there was contamination, it occurred under Toscano security. He said, which indicates negligence and supports relocation for care. I stepped forward. One more word. I said quietly, and I will make you regret being educated. Counsel swallowed. I turned my head slightly toward Raphael. Hard drive. I said. Raphael handed Venturi the case. Venturi looked uneasy. Signore, play it. I ordered. Venturi hesitated. Francesca's voice cut in, calm and sharp. Play it. Venturi's hands trembled slightly as he connected the drive to the tablet on the steps. The speaker chimed. The screen lit. Then the audio played. A male voice, calm, controlled, filled the courtyard. You enter and you assess. The voice said, if she looks unstable, you call it an emergency. You get her on transport. You don't argue. You don't hesitate. A pause. If he resists, you record it. We need proof of undue influence. The air turned to ice. My uncle went rigid. My aunt looked like she might faint. Giulia's eyes narrowed. Delighted in a way only predators can be delighted, because she was watching power flip. Bernadello Counsel's face went gray. Francesca's gaze locked on the crowd. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a witness. Venturi lifted his chin, voice steady now that the evidence spoke for him. This recording was obtained from the nurse who attempted to access the signora under false pretenses. Counsel's mouth opened. No sound came out, because the courtyard had heard his voice. Everyone knew it. A lawyer's greatest weapon is plausible deniability. We just ripped it out of his hands. Francesca stepped forward then. Not. Behind me. Beside me. Her hand went to her stomach, palm flat, and she lifted her chin toward her grandfather's door. Open it, she said. A guard hesitated. Then my uncle snapped. Do it. The door opened wider. Inside, the patriarch sat in a chair, oxygen line hissing, face skeletal but eyes still burning. He stared at the tablet like it was a blasphemy. He stared at Francesca like she was betrayal. Francesca, he rasped. She didn't flinch. No, she replied softly. Grandfather. His mouth twisted. You bring shame to this house. Francesca's voice stayed steady. You brought shame when you turned my body into a deadline. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The patriarch's eyes cut to me. Toscano. I met his gaze. Bernadello. He coughed, a wet, ugly sound. Return her. I didn't move. Francesca stepped closer to the doorway. Voice calm and lethal. You don't get to say return, she said. I'm not a shipment. The patriarch's eyes glittered. You are legacy. Francesca shook her head once. No, she said. I'm a person, and you forgot that because you only see bloodlines. His breathing hitched. He leaned forward, trembling with rage. You will obey. Francesca's eyes didn't waver. I did, she said. I married the man you chose. I endured the surveillance. I endured the humiliation. I endured the way you spoke about me as if I wasn't standing in the room. Her voice sharpened. And you still tried to take my child from me. The patriarch's mouth tightened. He looked away for half a second. That was the tell. Not guilt. Calculation. Francesca's voice dropped into something colder. You wrote phases about me, she said. Phase 1, conception. Phase 2, remove mother from decision-making. My uncle flinched like she'd slapped him. My aunt began to cry silently. The patriarch's eyes went flat. You were never meant to decide. The sentence was a confession. It hung in the air like poison. Francesca nodded once, as if she'd expected it. Then she turned slightly toward the courtyard, toward the lawyers, the witnesses, the cameras my men had positioned on the perimeter. So let it be heard, she said, voice clear. From his mouth, the patriarch's eyes widened a fraction, realizing too late he'd spoken the truth out loud. Francesca looked back at him. You wanted an heir, she said. You got one. She placed her hand over her stomach again, and for the first time, the gesture wasn't fear. It was power. But you don't get to own the mother, she continued, and you don't get to own the child. The patriarch's face twisted. You're ungrateful. Francesca's smile was small and sharp. I'm unowned. Then I stepped forward, because the courtyard needed the final line from the man they feared. I looked at Bernadello counsel. He stood frozen, sweat shining at his temple. You filed an emergency petition. I said calmly. You attempted an extraction. You arranged sedation and narrative framing. Counsel's voice came out thin. This is, confess. I said. His eyes widened. I will not. Raphael stepped closer, holding up his tablet. Your payments, Raphael said quietly. Your messages. Your call logs. Your voice. Counsel swallowed hard. I leaned in, close enough to make him feel it. You can confess. I murmured. Or you can disappear. His face went gray. He looked toward the patriarch as if the old man could save him. The patriarch's gaze stayed cold. He wouldn't save anyone. That was the dynasty's true religion, sacrifice. Counsel's mouth opened, trembling. And then he did it, because he was a coward wrapped in education. He spoke. I coordinated the petition. He said, voice cracking. I arranged Casa Aurelia oversight. I authorized emergency transport protocols. His voice faltered. He looked at Francesca, and something in her stare made him finish the sentence. I authorized sedation attempts. He whispered. The courtyard went dead silent. Then a low sound moved through the crowd, outrage, disbelief, fear. My uncle sagged like the ground had fallen away. My aunt sobbed openly now. Julia watched, expression unreadable. But her eyes carried one clear thought. The old order is dying. Vittoria backed away, face pale. Good. Let her learn what happens when she underestimates a woman with teeth and a husband with none. I turned my gaze to the patriarch. You wanted certainty. I said, here it is. The patriarch's breathing rattled. His eyes burned. You will destroy everything, he rasped. Francesca's voice cut in. Calm. You already did. We're just not cleaning up your mess quietly. I looked at my wife. She stood with her spine straight, eyes bright, face calm, not broken, not grateful, powerful. I stepped to her side and put my hand at her waist, visible, steady. This time, the touch wasn't to warn the room. It was to align with her, to show everyone who thought they could take her that they were looking at the wrong center of power now. The patriarch's eyes narrowed. You think you've won? Francesca's chin lifted. No, she said. I think I'm done being used. The old man coughed again, body shaking with the effort of staying alive long enough to keep commanding. But he was losing, not because death was coming, because obedience was leaving. I turned slightly toward Raphael. Release the evidence to the court, I said, and to the press. Raphael nodded once. Yes, signore. Francesca's eyes flicked to me. You're going public. Yes, I replied. Her mouth tightened. That makes me a headline. It makes you unstealable. I said. The words landed, because darkness loves secrecy, but predators love it more. We were taking their favorite weapon away. I looked at the patriarch one last time. You can die with your empire, I said calmly, but you don't take her with you. His eyes widened with rage. Then his face tightened, and for one terrifying second, I thought he would lunge out of his chair. He didn't. He only stared, impotent, furious, dying. Francesca stepped forward again, close enough for him to see her clearly. You wanted me to be a vessel, she said softly. You made me something else. She turned away from him without waiting for permission. That was the real death. Not his body. His authority. As we walked down the steps together, the courtyard parted. Not because they respected us. Because they feared what we'd become. At the gate, Francesca paused and looked back at the estate. Her old home. Her old prison. Her old name. Then she looked at me. Her voice came low. Steady. They'll keep trying, she said. Yes, I replied. Her hand went to her stomach again. Then she said the sentence that turned this from survival into rule. Then they keep dying. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. I just answered with the only vow I had ever truly meant. Bene. I murmured. Good. I opened the car door for her, not like a gentleman, not like romance, like a man moving the center of his world into armor. She slid in, chin lifted, eyes burning. I got in beside her and closed the door. The car pulled away as the Bernadello estate shrank in the window. And in the quiet, with the engine steady and Raphael's convoy behind us, Francesca exhaled, one long breath she hadn't been able to take in months. I put my hand over hers on her stomach. Not gentle, steady. One clear message in a single touch. They wanted your body for legacy. They created something worse for them instead. They created a wife who won't kneel, and a husband who won't share. Because the heir isn't their victory. It's ours.
Epilogue. Francesca. The first shot hit the outer wall at 2:17. It wasn't loud the way movies lie about gunfire. No dramatic boom, no heroic echo. It was a dull, ugly thud that vibrated through concrete and bone, followed by the high, sharp scream of an alarm that didn't beg for help. It warned. Because this wasn't a house. It was a fortress. And fortresses don't call the police. They call the men already waiting with their fingers on triggers. I was on my back in a room lit too bright, gripping the edge of the mattress hard enough to bruise my own hands. Sweat slicked my skin, my hair stuck to my throat. My breathing came in short, furious bursts I couldn't control, no matter how proud I was. The contraction had started a minute earlier, swelling inside me like a tide I couldn't hold back. The next one would be worse. The next one always was. Dr. Venturi leaned in over me, his voice steady, calm, professional, the only kind of calm I trusted anymore. "Stay with me, Signora," he said. "You're doing well." I wanted to spit at the phrase doing well, because in my world, doing well meant complying. And this didn't feel like compliance. It felt like war inside my body. Another alarm chirped, lower, coded, men shouting in Italian in the corridor outside. Raffaele's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Second perimeter now! Chiudi! Lock it!" Then Lazzaro's voice, colder, deeper, too calm to be comfort. "Let them come." The words didn't soothe. They sharpened the room. Because when Lazzaro Toscano said "let them come," it meant he'd already decided where the bodies would fall. Venturi's eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. He kept his hands steady. He kept his voice even. "You focus on this," he said quietly, "not them." I forced air into my lungs, teeth clenched. "They picked tonight." Venturi didn't deny it. Yes, of course they did. They'd tried paper. They'd tried doctors. They'd tried sedatives and signatures. And when all of that failed, they'd chosen the oldest method dynasties trust, force. The contraction tightened again, hard, merciless. I groaned through it, refusing to scream the way they expected, refusing to give the cameras outside the walls a soundtrack they could use later. Venturi pressed 2 fingers to my pulse, checked my face. "Good," he murmured again. "Good." Everything in this story was judged. My marriage, my body, my ability to endure. But tonight, the judgment wasn't coming from my family. Tonight, it came from nature. And nature didn't negotiate. A door opened. Heavy footsteps entered the room, not rushing. Lazzaro never rushed. He moved like time belonged to him and the world was forced to adjust. I turned my head and saw him in black. No suit, no tie, sleeves rolled, a faint smear of something dark on his forearm that wasn't mine. Blood or dirt, I didn't know. His hair was slightly disordered, his expression unreadable. His eyes found me and locked. They didn't soften, they sharpened. The kind of focus a man gets when he's deciding what to kill first. Venturi spoke without turning. "Signore?" Lazzaro didn't answer him. He came to my bedside and stopped close enough that my breath touched his hand. "Francesca," he said. My name in his voice wasn't romance. It was grounding. I tried to smile. It came out as a grimace. "Are they?" "Outside," he said. "Not inside." My chest tightened. "Yet." His jaw flexed once. "They won't be." Another contraction rolled through me, stealing the air. I squeezed the sheet. My nails scraped fabric. Lazzaro's hand came down, not on my stomach, not possessive, on my shoulder, firm, steady, an anchor. "Breathe," he ordered quietly, Italian threading through it like command. "Respira." I hated it that my body obeyed him faster than my pride could protest. I inhaled, shaking, exhaled. Venturi's voice stayed calm. "You're close, Signora. Stay with us." Us. That word did something to me that hurt, because I had spent my whole life being handled by them. Tonight I was with us. A sound cracked from outside, gunfire, closer now, followed by a hollow metallic clang. Raffaele shouted something sharp. A man screamed, cut off abruptly. Lazzaro didn't turn his head. He didn't flinch. His gaze stayed on me like the battlefield outside was secondary. That should have frightened me. It didn't, because I understood what he was doing. He was choosing his center. He was refusing to be lured away from it. "You're bleeding," I said suddenly, seeing the smear on his knuckles now, fresh red along the ridge. His eyes didn't move. "It's not mine." The sentence landed like ice. I swallowed hard. Another contraction tore through me, stronger, brutal enough to shake my vision. A sound left my throat, half growl, half gasp. Lazzaro's hand tightened on my shoulder, not harder, just more present. "You're not dying here," he said, voice flat. I snapped back through clenched teeth. I wasn't planning to. A flicker, barely there, moved through his eyes. Not amusement. Approval. Because he didn't need me soft. He needed me alive and fighting. Venturi leaned closer. "Now," he said. "With the next one, you push." The word push felt like a command from the universe. I nodded once, jaw tight. Outside, another burst of gunfire. A shout. "They're breaching the outer." Lazzaro's voice cut into the intercom on the wall, calm enough to be horrifying. "Kill the lights on the east corridor. Funnel them. Do not let them scatter." A pause. Then lower. "Bring me the leader alive. Alive. Not mercy. Interrogation." I exhaled shakily. The next contraction hit like a wave made of knives. I pushed. Pain exploded through my body, not sharp like a cut, deep, stretching, consuming. Venturi's voice stayed steady. "Good. Again. Stay with it." I pushed again, vision blurring. Lazzaro's hand didn't leave my shoulder. His thumb pressed once, firm, rhythmic, an anchor, a metronome, a reminder, "You are here, you are still you." The door slammed somewhere outside. Raffaele's voice shouted, "Down! Down!" A muffled thump. Then silence, not peace, a pause between violence. Venturi's voice sharpened slightly. "Again, Signora, one more." My body shook. I pushed. A sound ripped out of me, raw, ugly, honest. Then, a cry, small, furious, indignant, alive. For 1 second, the room stopped being a fortress. It became a heartbeat. Venturi lifted the baby carefully, brisk and competent. "He's here." I barely saw through the tears I refused to let fall. Not because I wasn't emotional. Because I refused to be sentimental in a room that still smelled like war. Venturi placed him on my chest. Warm, heavy, real. The baby's face scrunched, mouth open in outrage at the world, then settled as if my skin was the only language he understood. My hands trembled around him. My breath broke. Something inside me cracked open. Not soft, not fragile. Powerful, because the dynasty had wanted an heir like a trophy. And here he was, not theirs. Mine. A sharp sound from outside. Someone yelling, then footsteps pounding closer. Venturi's head snapped up. "Raffaele?" The door opened hard. Raffaele entered with 2 men, dragging a third. The man's hands were bound, his face bloodied, his expensive coat torn. Bernadello counsel. The one who'd tried to put my pregnancy into a petition. The one who'd tried to label me unstable and relocate me for my care. Now he was in my birthing room, on his knees, panting like a dog. His eyes lifted and landed on the baby on my chest. Something twisted in his expression. Greed, relief, triumph. As if he still thought this child belonged to the dynasty. Lazzaro turned slowly. His voice was calm. "You brought him." Raffaele nodded once. "Alive, signore." Counsel tried to speak. This is illegal." Lazzaro stepped toward him without hurry. "My wife is bleeding," he said. "My child is breathing, and you walked into my house." Counsel swallowed hard. "The court—" Lazzaro crouched in front of him, eyes flat. "The court doesn't enter rooms like this." Counsel's lip trembled. "The patriarch." Lazzaro's gaze sharpened. "Your patriarch is a dying man who thought he could buy my obedience." He leaned slightly closer. "I don't sell," he said. Counsel's eyes flicked desperately to me. Appeal, strategy, trying to use my femininity like a shield. "Francesca," he rasped, "this is your family." I lifted my chin. My son's warmth anchored me. My family tried to drug me, I said, voice steady. My family tried to take my child by. My family wrote phases about my body like I was a file. Counsel's mouth opened. No words came out, because there was no argument left. Lazaro stood. He didn't look at me. He didn't ask permission, but his hand came briefly to the edge of the bed, 2 fingers touching my wrist for 1 second. A silent question. Are you steady? I was. I nodded once. That was all he needed. Lazaro turned back to Counsel. You wanted an heir, he said. Look. Counsel's eyes flicked to the baby again, hungry. Then Lazaro's voice dropped, cold enough to freeze blood. You don't get him, he said. Counsel swallowed. He belongs to the dynasty. Lazaro moved, not fast, final. He grabbed Counsel by the front of his shirt and hauled him to his feet like he weighed nothing. Counsel gagged on fear. I'm going to give you one gift, Lazaro said. You will live long enough to tell them what happened tonight. Counsel's eyes went wide. You will tell them, Lazaro interrupted, that you reached for my wife during birth. He dragged Counsel toward the door. You will tell them, he continued, voice calm, that it cost them their last clean option. Raffaele stepped aside, opening the path. Counsel looked back at me one last time, desperation in his eyes. I didn't look away. I held my son tighter, because I wasn't the girl in the war room anymore. I was the mother who survived the system and watched it bleed. Lazaro paused at the door and looked back at Venturi. Doctor, he said, stay. Venturi nodded once, face pale but steady. Then Lazaro looked at Raffaele. No more breaches, he said. Raffaele's jaw tightened. None, signore. Lazaro dragged Counsel out. The door shut. The violence moved away. Not ended, relocated. That was Lazaro's version of mercy. He didn't stop the war. He moved it away from my body. Venturi leaned over me again. You did well, he said. I exhaled shakily, staring down at the baby. My son blinked up at me, eyes unfocused, tiny fist curled like he already knew how to fight. I laughed once, quiet and cracked. Of course, I whispered. Of course you'd come out angry. Venturi's mouth twitched, deadpan, professional. He's healthy. Healthy. The word felt like a miracle in a story that didn't believe in miracles. The door opened again, softer this time. Lazaro returned. His sleeves were rolled higher now, his knuckles were clean, his expression was the same, cold, controlled. But his eyes went straight to the baby. He stopped at the foot of the bed and stared like he didn't trust the world to be real. I watched him, my chest tight. Come here, I said quietly. He didn't move immediately. He looked at Venturi. Are they stable? Venturi nodded. Yes, signore. Lazaro stepped closer. Not rushing. A man approaching something sacred without admitting he believed in sacred things. He stood beside me and looked down at the baby on my chest. My son's tiny mouth opened and closed like he was tasting the air. Lazaro's hand hovered, didn't touch. He didn't do softness. He did restraint. I lifted my chin. He's ours. Lazaro's gaze flicked to mine. Yes, one word. Absolute. The baby made a small sound, then settled again, heavy and warm against me. Lazaro's hand finally came down, flat, steady, over the baby's back and my hand. Not a caress, a claim, a shield, a vow made without sentiment. I swallowed hard. They're going to keep coming. Lazaro's voice stayed calm. Let them, I stared at him. You're not tired. His eyes stayed flat. No. Are you ever... I caught myself, the word love trying to climb out of my mouth like a mistake. Lazaro's gaze sharpened as if he'd heard it anyway. He leaned in, mouth near my temple, voice low in Italian. Say viva, he murmured. You're alive. That was his version of tenderness. Not I love you, not I'm sorry, just the most important fact in a world designed to erase women. You're alive. And it wasn't soft. It was everything. Venturi quietly finished what he needed to do, gave instructions to the nurse Lazaro trusted, then left the room as if he understood this space belonged to the family now. The real one, forged in war. When we were alone, the fortress felt quieter. Not safe. Just quieter. I shifted slightly, exhausted, and Lazaro adjusted immediately, his arms sliding behind my shoulders, careful not to jostle the baby, keeping me supported without making it a performance. I leaned back against him, my son still on my chest. My breathing slowed. My body finally believed the fight was over for the moment. Lazaro's hand stayed on the baby's back, steady and unmoving. Aftercare. His version, not cuddling, not softness, just the unbreakable promise of his presence. I whispered into the quiet, my grandfather is going to die. Lazaro didn't hesitate. Yes, and the empire, I added. Yes, he repeated. I turned my head slightly, looking up at him. What happens now? His eyes met mine. Cold. Possessive. Certain. We build, he said. I swallowed hard. A new dynasty. His mouth didn't smile. A new order. I nodded once, exhausted but clear. Outside, somewhere beyond these walls, my family's empire was collapsing under its own cruelty. Inside, my son breathed against my skin, and the man who had once been chosen as my brutal heir-maker sat behind me like a wall. Dangerous, unsoftened, absolutely mine. I stared down at my baby and whispered, "You'll never belong to them." Lazaro's hand tightened once, gentle only in the sense that he didn't crush. "My," he murmured. "Never." Then he added, voice low, like a final sentence written in blood. "Che vengano," he said. "Let them come." I closed my eyes. Not because I was naive enough to believe the world was safe, because for the first time since the war room, I understood the truth with absolute clarity. They forced me into a marriage to produce an heir fast. They got their heir, but they lost the mother. They lost the narrative. They lost control. And what they created instead was a woman who would never be traded again, and a husband who would burn any empire that tried. If you loved this dark arranged marriage story of obsession, inheritance, and a husband who became far too possessive, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe for more dark Mafia romance audiobooks. And tell me in the comments, when did this stop being about the heir and start becoming about obsession? Thank you for spending your time with me and my words. Until next time, stay ruined. Written and brought to life by Bayless.